we go. All right. So, guys, we are looking at PFT 115 here. I want to take us through two things before we actually get into chapter one. First, I want to take us through just a really brief day by day, just so you guys know what's going to happen over the next few days of class. And then that makes sense. So if I take myself over to Canvas here and I log in, you're going to get an invite from me after class today. This is mostly going to be self-propelled work, by the way, for a lot of this. So you can actually go at your own pace, which is really nice. But take a look down and don't pay attention to these. These are, prototypes. But you take a look up here and you see this. This is our day by day. This will be available for download, which will be very helpful. It's got a little quick course description basically saying like, hey, this is a test prep day. This needs to be updated. Those are our old numbers and stuff, but it also has our schedule: Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Zoom, Tuesday, Thursday in person at Sochi. And then you can see basically, first thing I'm going through is our little weekly agenda, basically walking you through what our schedule looks like and what this class is. Then we're going to work our way through chapters 1 and 2 today. And then I'm going to set you guys up with a little bit of homework, and you're going to knock that homework out for me. And then, tomorrow, it's kind of the same thing, except that we're meeting in person. So I will open up tomorrow by making sure that we're all synced up on where we're headed. Then we'll go through a lesson. Then I'm going to send you down to the gym, hook you up with an at-home assignment, rinse and repeat. And that's basically how this whole class is going to run, right? We're going to open up every day with just like a really quick check in with you guys and review, make sure everybody knows what's happening. Then we're going to work our way through our lesson. After that, I'm going to give you homework. And that's basically how it's going to go every single day. So like I said, very different than our traditional practicums. But also really, really helpful. I know some of you guys haven't had a really super great perspective on the basics of NASM yet. You might not even be, at this point, even still super familiar with NASM as a company and what it is and who they are and what they're doing. This class, you are going to definitely know, because we're about to take you through that entire freaking textbook in 12 lessons. So that is going to hopefully help everybody feel much, much, much more confident on that. So that being said, let's talk about what we want to do with NASM as a company. What is your guys' responsibility for how to get certified? So I'm going to head over here. I'm just going to type in NASM 7th edition exam blueprint. So this is a really cool thing that NASM does because they are required to, but they put out this exam blueprint. And basically, in order to pass your NASM exam, you are going to need to pass a 120 question test. Now, some of you hairs might be coming up on the back of your neck when I say that, because you're like, I thought it was 100 questions. It is actually only 100 questions. You actually only have to get 100 questions of real content in your noggins, but there are actually going to be 120 questions on the day that you go to take your test. That's very confusing. Let's go ahead and break that down. Let's go ahead and break that down. Karen, I saw just like, what?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Just the letters are small, so I'm trying
to
see.
No, I mean, honestly, it's weird that it's 120 or 100. So I thought it was, I was just like,
no, that was expected. That was expected.
So basically the way it works, guys, you have to get 100 questions into your noggin, right? They are going to test you on 100 questions, and they're going to be from these 6 domains. They're a little bit different between every personal training certification out there, but for the most part, the domains are pretty similar. All of the personal training certifications out there, ACE, ACSM, NESTA, ISSA, all the NASM competitors, they all kind of answer to the same governing body, which is this company called the NCCA. It's a government agency. And they all have to kind of follow the same rules. Number one, in order to become a trainer that is CPT certified, You have to take an in-person test, or nowadays they do let you do it at home as long as it's proctored like on a camera and stuff. And it's they'll make you like show your entire room and make sure that like there's only one door and nobody can sneak in there and give you the answers. It's like you're becoming a spy or something. Uh, so that's what that one's interesting. I recommend just doing the in-person. It's, in my opinion, a little bit easier and less janky. But basically you will have to, sign all this stuff and do all these things. And then you're gonna, oh Lord. Hi, LaPatra, how you doing? I'm gonna go ahead and put you on mute, okay? Ooh, man. And then Love Patra, if you can do me a favor and get that camera on, that is going to be super helpful today. All right. So, okay, so like I said, you're gonna have to take this test, right? So the way it's gonna work is you have 100 questions from these areas. So you can see 15% of 100. That means 15 questions from basic applied sciences and nutritional concepts. So if you sort of take a look at your NASM table of contents, which I have sneaking around here, basic applied science and nutritional concepts, that is going to be this section 3 right here. So you'll have 15 questions from chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so that means that like, let's think of this in terms of test prep, right? Let's think of this in terms of like how you guys are going to spend your time. We kind of go back to that first thing that I was just looking at there. And it's like, okay, that's 15 out of 100 questions from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters, right? That's not the biggest chunk of the test. Now, that being said, it's actually really important to make sure that you understand these chapters because they give you the knowledge to interpret the rest of the textbook. So I'm not saying that these chapters are unimportant. That is not the message that I'm trying to send here. But in terms of like where you are going to spend most of your time working on like memorizing certain concepts and answers that like you can pull out of a hat really quickly on test day, these are probably not where most of your questions are coming from. So then we look at domain 2, that's going to be client relations and behavior coaching. Also about 15%, right? But that 15% is actually only coming out of 2 chapters here, chapters 3 and 4, which we will be getting into tomorrow. That's actually a pretty good percentage of those chapters. So if you do a good job with your client coaching behavior relationships chapter, I messed that up, client relations and behavioral coaching chapters, if you do a good job with those, it's a lot less content to get 15 questions right out the gate. So that's how you kind of want to play this game a little bit when it comes to test prep, right? Like these are broad concepts that are really much more based on like a scientific understanding of things. These are going to be much more specific examples. So if you're going to, let's say, read a certain chapter a certain number of times based on like how much of a percentage it is, right? I would say you're going to get the most bang for your buck. This is very little to read. It's only 2 chapters, and you're still going to get the same chunk of questions compared to this 5. Is that, or sorry, this 6. Does that make sense, guys? Like it's where you're sort of putting your efforts, right? Moving forward, we see assessment is going to be 16%, and that is 2 whole chapters. So a larger percentage and still only 2 chapters. These are 2 of the most important chapters in my opinion. These are very, very, very valuable. That's going to get you a lot of points for very little effort. Again, it's a weird concept because it's almost like we're gamifying our studying, but really that's sort of how this works. We're all human, right? We all only have a certain capacity and length of time that we can spend doing things. I am always going to try and help you guys find the most bang for your buck. So these are really, really valuable chunks of your time. These are also very valuable chunks of your time. Now, for my favorite part, you take a look here at domain 4, program design. That is 20 of your test. That's a fifth of the questions you're going to be asked. And then there's also this exercise technique and training instruction. What's the difference between exercise technique, training instruction, and program design? Not much, guys. In fact, those are honestly almost kind of the same thing. The only difference is that program design is sort of the general understanding of how sets, reps, tempos, and things like that work. And the exercise technique and training instruction is much more about how you put it together in a program for a client, the practical real life application of these things. While it is important to know the sets and reps, it's also really important to know, like, if someone's knees are caving in, which muscle is tight? It's going to be the adductors, by the way. So being able to actually apply that. So really, it is all kind of program design when you think about it, right? So that's really 44% of the test right there over these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters, which is why we have so many practicums at Sochi, right? You guys have been through, a couple of you guys have been through a few practicums with me. We spent a lot of time talking about, like, this is the sets, this is the reps, this is the tempo, these are the exercises you choose. Some of you guys, that was probably a little bit confusing if that was your first class with me, Elena. I know that you got thrown to the wolves when you jumped right into your first program design class. But you can see why we spend so much time on this. It's almost half of your test. It's about 44%. So that's why we put so much emphasis on that. Hopefully that stuff is starting to get a little bit more clear to you guys. Eric, I know you got a good sort of example of how we do things yesterday when we were sort of breaking our program design stuff down. But that is basically where I tell people to put most of their efforts. It's about half the test in its own concept. And if you guys really put most of your effort into your assessments and exercise technique and training instruction, and you limp through the rest of this, you will still probably walk away with at least a 70% on your test, which is all you need to pass. So if we are gamifying things, in my opinion, that is the best strategy to win. Now, that being said, that's a little bit different than being just like a really good trainer. That's why we have so many in-person lessons. Because while I do think it is really important to pass your test, it is also really important to make sure that you kick butt at this job. If this is strictly the career that you guys are heading in. So there is a little bit at the end here. Domain 6, this is professional development and responsibility. You will notice that that is the first 2 chapters we're actually doing today. However, most of the questions, so that's only 10 out of 100, most of the questions actually don't come out of these first 2 chapters. That sounds really weird, but what I mean by that is a lot of your personal responsibility part is actually not covered in the textbook super well. The day you get your NASM codes, you will get an exam sort of catalog. And it'll have all of your rules that you need to follow as a NASM trainer. For the record, those rules are actually super simple. You have to pass this 100 question test, and it will have 20 extra questions I'm going to talk about in just a second. And you have to make sure that you stay certified by doing continuing education every 2 years, which basically means you just need to earn 20 hours of continuing education units within a 2-year window in order to keep that up. Now, you guys are going to be really super covered on that very, very easily. Your 20 hours are going to be covered with that corrective exercise textbook. That is its own certification. So if you pass that, that means that you get your 20 hours. They are assuming it takes 20 hours to study that book. Or your nutrition coaching. Either one of them can actually be used as your first 2 CEUs. So you're covered on that. Just the one big thing that I have run into a couple times, don't forget, guys, you also have to get your CPR. When it comes to CEUs, you can earn a maximum of 1.9, but the remaining 0.1, 100% of the time, always has to be CPR. So you could earn 500 CEUs. It wouldn't matter if you don't have that 0.1 CPR. So, and that's basically just NASM, and or the NCCA makes NASM check that people have CPT. I actually don't know why. I feel like those should be separate, but it is how it is. So them's the rules. Now, like I said, this is a 100-question test, but at the same time, I said you are going to answer 120 questions. What's up with that? Well, there are going to be 20 survey questions mixed in with your test. Now, NASA knows which questions are which in the program, in the backlog of the software, all that. So if you get any of those 20 survey questions correct, they don't help you. So you could get all 20 of them right, and they are worth a grand total of 0 points. That is a big bagel. You could get all 20 of them wrong, and it will count against you for a grand total of 0 points. So they're just survey questions that NASA mixes in. I asked about it one time because I was like, that is a dumb thing. Why is that the case? And the way NASA explains it, basically, if you go to their website, they sell a lot of extra study materials and things like that to help people pass their test. And so some of those extra study materials are just bonus content, but they are not required to be on the test. So, it might be like a brief sentence about like, this is a really good way to talk to your clients if they keep showing up late. You know what I mean? And that could be like just maybe a small concept that shows up in one of their other materials that isn't in the standard textbook. Because it's not in the standard textbook, they can't test on it. But that concept was wrapped into a larger bonus material that people purchased. So if they find that people get that question right, and then they look on their account later and they see that they purchased this thing, and they notice that like that type of person or that group of people did better than the average test taker, it kind of tells NASA like, oh, when we write the 8th edition, we should probably include this because people did better when they studied this way. So it helps NASA basically like dial in and write the next version of the test and write the next textbook. So that's why they do those survey questions. It kind of sucks because you don't get any extra time. And you don't know which questions are survey questions, unfortunately. I wish they would just do all 20 at the end, but they don't do it that way. They do it mixed into the test randomly. So here's what I tell everybody, guys. This is my advice when you go to take your test. And I will remind you of this when I give you, because I go through this I actually go through almost this whole spiel with every one of you individually when you schedule your test. But here's my deal. When you go to take your test, and you have that feeling of test anxiety where you don't know the answer to a question and your heart squeezes a little bit and your blood starts racing a little bit faster and you get the like kind of tunnel vision, all those like things that we kind of feel sometimes when we go to take a test and we get nervous. You're great on a test when you know the answers, but when you have that feeling of like, oh, I don't know this answer, it is probably a survey question. There are 20 questions that you don't have the materials to. So if you feel that feeling, push it out the door. It is probably out of your control, and you wouldn't have known the answer to that question anyways because you don't have those materials. So in a lot of ways, you can kind of use that to hopefully get your confidence back. That being said, I have had plenty of students like friggin' nail it. And we actually had a conversation with NASA once, and they were like, Sochi students actually do really well on our survey questions. Mostly because you guys have been through so much other content that is not in the textbook. You know what I mean? Like, and so like, yeah, that was a big compliment actually. So you guys will probably just do great. But if you ever get that feeling, I want you to remember this moment right now where I said it's probably a survey question. So just answer it and move on to the next one, and don't let it eat away at you. So there's my test prep advice. Like I said, I am going to get you guys this blueprint. Oh, and most important thing, I totally forgot to even mention, the rest of this blueprint. Look at this, guys. This is pages and pages and pages, and it tells you exactly what the most important concepts out of every chapter are. So take a look up here. We go to, we'll scroll down to domain 3, which is assessment, 16% of the test. Well, let's go down to domain 3, shall we? Take a look over here. That's, I missed it. And it says, here's the most important tasks, right? You got to be able to understand the difference between subjective and objective information, like a client history and readiness, and know what those are, right? That's going to be pretty easy because we talk about that a lot. You need to be able to understand static assessments, like the static posture assessment, movement assessments, like the overhead squat, the pushing, the pulling, the single leg squat. Endurance assessments, how to do a 1-rep max test, how to do a push-up test and a vertical jump test. SAQ assessments, these are the 40-yard dash, 5, 10, 5, and box drills. Basically, when you go through the book, you are going to recognize a few of these things, like the Rockport walk test, for instance, right? That's a 1-mile walk. The 3-minute step test, that's 3 minutes of stepping onto, and what would a test question for that look like? Well, how many inches is the box? And if you haven't been through this with me yet, it's a 12-inch box. How long do you go? 3 minutes exactly. What's the pace? 96 steps per minute, right? So like those are all the things that could be test questions. It's directly right here on the blueprint. It will literally tell you exactly what to study. Stand by, guys. We're hey, hello, Padre. I'm gonna mute you again, just because we can hear your background. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that is what this class is. That is what the blueprint is. That is how to pass your test. All we've got left is to work our way through chapters 1 and 2. But checking in with you guys, questions, comments, concerns so far. How are y'all feeling? I see a thumbs up. I dig it. I'm into it. Everybody feeling good? All right. Always feel free to just, blurt a question out, guys. Or use that raise hand feature on the Zoom thing. That's super, super helpful. It flashes my whole screen every time somebody does that. So, all right. Let's open up chapter 1 here. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like if I'm gonna need to ask a question, I don't know how rude is it going to be that I cannot really use that feature raise hand because it takes me forever to find it.
Yeah.
So sorry if I just like, excuse me, I have a question.
No,
sorry,
people. That's also totally fine. That's totally fine. Yeah, Elena, that is not gonna bother me at all. Guys, I love the questions are my favorite part. You gotta remember, I've taught these lessons.
Is this the book that we already have?
Yeah.
That the slides that are going down, is this?
Yep. So this is the 7th edition. This is this one right here. The one where the girl in the pink shirt. That one.
Okay.
You guys have got this one. The one that I need, the one that Luis was asking about earlier, is the 2nd edition CES. That's this one. This is the one that I think some of you guys have. Actually, I don't, maybe not. But yeah, this is the one that I need to get you guys. This is the one that like we've had like a single copy sitting in the office for way too long. That I need to friggin' get you guys. So yeah, and then the other one that you guys are gonna get is this one. There it is. The PES, but we have not even touched on that yet. So we'll get this one way later.
Okay, so the one that we're looking at today is the one that we have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can go grab it. All right.
That's this one. Yeah, we're working our way through chapters 1 and 2 today. So yeah, this is honestly this is an introductory chapter, guys. This first one is a real piece of cake. It is literally just going to be all about like sort of like what your general responsibilities are. I've already talked a good chunk about all the stuff in this one even this morning. So we got an easy day ahead of us for this first lesson here. But where's my word pad? That and zoom that to 120. Whoa. not 247. All right. So yeah, I'm going to be making some notes for you guys as we go along because I want them to be super helpful. I will print these every time we show up in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Sochi. And that way you guys have them along with the exam blueprint. I want to make sure everybody gets a copy of that tomorrow. It's available for download on the Canvas later. But obviously, you know, having the real life thing is just helpful. So we're gonna print off some trees tomorrow, but it is very, very, very helpful stuff. So today we are looking at PFT 115, Chapter 1, the modern state of health and fitness, and then we'll afterwards get into Chapter 2, the personal training profession. But Chapter 1, our objectives this morning are to distinguish your role within the allied health industry. I love that, by the way, that first line there, just the allied health industry, because it's like trainers unite, dietitians come together, massage therapists, you know, it's like all the people that are here to help individuals deal with heart disease, aches, pains, and, you know, all kinds of different things. So that's like my favorite line that they use. I think it's like the only, this chapter's like the only time they ever use it, but I'm like, yeah, let's get them all together. And then let's find a way to get them covered by insurance. That's the next battle. Like we are getting to a point where like, you got to be able to write off your personal training, you know, like so many people need it. Identify the most prevalent chronic health conditions affecting sort of our modern society. That's going to be a big part of what we're dealing with. And so we want to be able to kind of talk about them. Then we want to differentiate between the ideas of evidence-based practice from fitness fads and myths. There are a lot of fads and myths out there. There's a lot of junky information about health and wellness, you know. It's just pretty complicated sometimes. In fact, I'm going to show just like a little video that just kind of break things up here before we take a break. That kind of really personifies what I mean by that in a really good way. It just talks about how like, why is there so much junky information and why do people believe it? You know, but it's complex I mean, at the end of the day, it's actually a pretty simple answer. It's just complicated, you know. And lastly, we want to talk about like what our scope of practice is. So as a personal trainer, I don't have, like, for the record, like I don't have a massage therapy license, you know. I know some of you guys already have yours and have been through that. Like you are trained in that way deeper than I have ever even remotely studied, you know. So it would be completely inappropriate for me to actually like use manual therapy techniques on my clients, you know, like that's not something I'm trained in. And so, you know, my scope of practice prevents me from like laying hands on a client directly, other than using like self-myofascial release techniques. So it is kind of interesting, right? There's a scope of practice there. I want to make sure that like I stay within my scope of practice, just like because you guys aren't certified yet, it would be pretty inappropriate for you to tell your clients specifically like what types of exercises or programs they should be engaging in, right? Until you sort of get this certification. There's a scope that you want to stay within, right? A really good example is dietitians, right? So as a trainer and a nutritionist, which is what we are going to be, we're going to be nutrition coaches, right? We are absolutely allowed to give our clients nutritional advice. We are not allowed to prescribe them a specific meal plan. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're probably thinking, I have been given meal plans from my clients, like my trainers, like before. I've seen trainers give out meal plans all the time. Yeah, they're actually not supposed to. Or what they do, the way they get around it is they give out a general example of something that is a generally healthy meal plan. You are totally welcome to do that. But what I cannot do is say, Jose, I want you to eat a cup of broccoli every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That is me prescribing food to you and telling you specifically. Like if I said 1 cup, I gave you a measurement, right? I gave you a unit and how much to consume. That's totally not something I'm allowed to do. Dietitians, absolutely. But nutritionists, absolutely not. Now, that being said, we can totally have a conversation about like, hey man, like broccoli's packed full of vitamin C and fiber, and it's really, really good for you. And it can add a lot of bulk to your diet, which can fill you up and make it easier for you to stay on a meal plan if you're on like a calorie restriction. So it's one of my favorite vegetables to like throw into a diet plan. Let's see if we can, come up with a plan for how to get more broccoli into your diet. That I'm totally allowed to do, right? What I didn't do was tell you specifically a certain number of grams of something to eat or cups or anything like that. So that can get confusing to people. So we have to understand our scope of practice, right? Even, this is going to sound nuts, but doctors, guys, like some of the most trained medical professionals in this country, I have seen programs that doctors just have like, I say I've seen it 100 times. This is something that will become a regular part of your careers if you end up working in training. You'll have a client who had a heart attack, or you had a client who, threw out their back or had knee surgery, or, all of various different things. And they'll be like, my doctor gave me this. And you'll see this like program, and it's just hot garbage. It happens all the time, and it's one of those things where it's like, look, I have no idea how to reconstruct someone's knee. I don't really want to know how to do that because it seems icky. Like, not my area. But that's not going to be my area. It's not something I should be focusing on. So while I can say, hey, like this is pretty severe, you might want to talk to your doctor about like, some form of like treatment for your knee. And maybe the doctor says surgery, right? And then they come back to me. Doctors are not trained on how to put together things in the gym, right? That's our area. So that's what scope of practice is. And I'm kind of doing my freaking lesson right now. I'm still in the intro, but that's what we're going to talk about with scope of practice. It's a really big deal. We want to make sure we stay within our realm, and then I always say one extra thing, just when it comes to scope of practice, and I'll mention this again later. It is really important to make sure that you stay within your scope of practice. It's also really important to be humble enough, guys, to understand that your scope of practice doesn't incorporate everything and solve everything. For instance, what I mean by that, chiropractors, they want to like put you back into alignment, 100%. That's what they know how to do. So that's the tool they want to use. Dietitians, they want to prescribe a diet to get you to meet your goals. That's what they know how to do. That's what they're going to try to do. Trainers, we're going to take somebody to the gym. That's what we know how to do. That's what we want to do. The reality is all of them are really viable solutions to the same place. So again, that's this allied health industry concept. I want you guys to understand your scope of practice. I also want you to make sure that while I think my approach to do things is the best, because that's what I understand the most, I do want to make sure that I always have that perspective that it's not the only way to do something, So those are our objectives today. Big thing. Welcome to NASM. Here's all the things that you're going to be getting with your CPT credentials, right? It's going to provide you with that scientific foundation to begin an exciting career as a personal trainer. It is going to be an evidence-based certification, meaning that like, this information could change in a couple of years. This is what we have done for a really long time. There's a lot of evidence to suggest these are the best practices of sets, reps, tempos, and things like that. It doesn't mean that it's black and white. That's what science is. It is full of answers, but those answers are flexible and they do sometimes change. We were 100% positive that the Earth was the center of the universe thousands of years ago. We were like, yeah, it's here. And then the sun and everything else circles around us, right? We were positive. That is how things worked. But the more we learned, the more we found out, maybe not so much, right? The same thing is true of personal training, It's funny. I always use Arnold as an example here because Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's actually he was a pretty knowledgeable guy when it came to working out and stuff. And a lot of his stuff is still used today. He was really great at coming up with effective exercises. The Arnold press is a very good way to work both your chest and shoulders, and it was his deal. He is a smart dude when it comes to knowing a lot about lifting. He didn't go to school for it. He just did a lot of trial and error in the gym. Now, that also led to some pretty crappy information as well. How do we sort of distinguish between the good and the bad? Well, that's where, like, we found a need for certified personal trainers. The personal training industry kind of started with just those big guys, those bodybuilders in the gym. People were like, well, they clearly know what they're doing. How do I do what you did? They're like, well, this is what I did. Try this out. And it had some pretty decent effects. I actually have nothing against cookie cutter or canned workouts, I shouldn't say nothing against. I have something against them. But I still think they have value. I think that being physically active and doing something is always going to be better than doing nothing. But what we found the need for as time went on, we found the need for dealing with specific aches and pains. We found needs for dealing with specific psychological issues that some people have. Maybe some people just aren't good at setting their goals. Maybe some people are not good at sticking to their goals. How many of you guys like set New Year's resolutions this year? Yeah, I see a head nod here and there. I see a head nod, but some of you have turned your cameras off again.
I did not.
No New Year's resolutions, Eric? Nope.
None to speak of. My mind just went right into the new year, and I'm still feeling like I'm in the last year.
Hey, you know what? Hey, sometimes no news years is good news years.
Worst thing for me is to make a resolution. I'm gonna do the opposite.
I have actually heard that many times as someone who has often shared many a New Year's resolution.
I think it's called self-sabotaging.
Sometimes it can be, yeah. Because that's what did people say sometimes? A resolution is something that you start and don't do, right? Or start and give up. But here's the thing. That doesn't have to be true, like it can.
Yeah, I look at it like that. I look at it as a good reset, because we get so off kilter by whatever the end of the year. I'm not trying to recreate myself or do anything so over the top, or I'm gonna have $1 million home by the end of this. I don't do that, but it's a good reset. It's like, okay, it just like gets me back to basics.
Yeah.
I look at it that positive way more than it's something that I'll never get to. And yeah, I mean, it's only day 3, but at least I've done one thing 3 days in a row now.
Hey, love that, right? So,
oh my, last year I wanted to lose 20 pounds. Guess what? I've gained 30.
Well, you're in the right class, Mamacita.
Right.
Let's go.
That's why I'm here. I got mad and enrolled into this program. I'm like, I have to do something about it.
I was just the marriage. That'll that's funny. No, well, all right. So we've got we got a 30-pound goal here and there. So yeah, I love talking about New Year's resolutions. I think that they are a really fun sort of like way to have a conversation around this stuff, because I think that while I am not a big fan of the colloquial idea of a New Year's resolution being something that you start and then give up on, but I love the idea that like people are motivated and they're trying to find new and exciting ways to kind of get where they want to go. Hopefully you guys are all motivated to get your NASMs in the 2024 season, because I believe you guys are getting those test codes by the end of the year, I think that's a really fun goal. So now we just need to come up with an action plan to meet that goal. And that's what most people screw up on. Most people are really good at setting goals, but goals don't get you very far without an action plan. So before we get into this, actually one more slide. So we were talking about evidence-based practice. What the heck is evidence-based practice? Like I said, Arnold is a pretty smart dude in a lot of ways. He came up with some really valid stuff, you know. But at the same time, a lot of his stuff got misinterpreted and, you know, kind of hurts people sometimes. So we got to make sure that we use the right type of info here. And by the way, just for the record, he has come out and said like, hey, this is what worked for us back in the day, but like that doesn't mean that it's the most effective way. Years later, he's a really humble dude in some ways. And is just awesome. And honestly, if you go down to the Golds in Venice for like every day for a week, you will run into him, by the way. He will talk your ear off if you tell him you're a trainer. Very, very easy to run into. But what is evidence-based practice? What do I mean when I say that? Well, let's get that definition up here because we're going to open up with that today. Evidence-based, should be hyphenated, practice, right? It is the conscientious, which is the friggin', my New Year's resolution is to remember how to spell this word. Conscientious use of current best evidence in making decisions about client care. So what we mean by that, really, right, the use of best evidence, right, is we're making sure that when we have a client who has like a goal or a nutritional diet or anything like that, we're using the best information available to us January 3rd, 2024. Is it possible that that information could change? Yeah, absolutely. You know, I am not a huge keto guy personally. I'm not knocking it if you are a keto person. I'm not bashing keto diets or anything like that. But I will say this, I mean, like, we have put major emphasis on carbohydrates for years in this country. Because when the information first came out about carbohydrates, when we first started studying how glucose acts in the body, it is your body's preferred fuel source. Glucose is your body's favorite source of energy. You got a couple different types of energy in the body. We're going to go over that when I get to metabolism with y'all. But like, glucose is your body's favorite. Now, anybody out there who is a big keto person is like, I don't like it when he says that. That can't be true. Because like I thought the body preferred to use fat as a fuel source. I became fat adapted and I love being on keto and it's gotten me great results. I'm definitely not saying you can't get good results on keto, but the body's preferred source of metabolism being glucose has also been kind of misinterpreted over the years. We used to be pretty physically active as a society. It used to be pretty difficult. You had to wash your clothes by hand, and then you had to hang them up on a clothesline, and then you had to go get them later. And it was a lot of freaking work, man. My mom made me do that once, by the way. I got into a mud fight when I was like 8 years old. If you're wondering what a mud fight is, it is exactly as it sounds. We went to the slough, my neighbor and I, and we just flung mud at each other and came home covered. And my mom was furious. And my parents collect antiques because they're weirdos. But they had one of those old school like washboards and like a little thing that you would wring your clothes through. And she made me wash my clothes by hands as a punishment. And I just remember like running it on that washboard with like my fingers and like, obviously I didn't know how to do it right. So probably was just did it wrong and that's why it hurt. But like, I remember my hands were all raw and they hurt. And I was 8 years old. I was like, this is terrible. And my mom was like, yeah, that's what I go through to wash your laundry. Don't get in a mud fight. And it was a good lesson. But that's how we used to do things. It was we were very physically active. I have got a load of dishes sitting in my dishwasher from last night right now. Zero effort, you know what I mean? I got a Roomba that does my vacuuming for me. All I have to do is hit a button. You know, I've got an automatic cat litter box. Thank God I have an automatic cat litter box. But that's all my work for me, you know? And it's great and this world is amazing. But at the same time, it doesn't burn as much energy as it used to. Now, when I say glucose is our favorite source of energy, what I mean is that it's our favorite source of energy for intense activity. We often lose that second half of that sentence. So when you're very, very, very active, glucose is great. Karen, I know you're a big like heavy lifter. You're going to the gym to like do some heavy barbell squatting and stuff. I want you to have some glucose beforehand, you know? Gina, I know you're like a big long distance runner. I want you to have some freaking carbs in your diet so you can have the energy to run the whole distance. You know what I mean? That stuff is really valuable for that. But then we're starting to see more and more people who are like, the low carb thing worked for me. I had a huge amount of success when I was on keto, or freaking carnivore. That's low carb to the most extreme. But like, you see people talk about the success. Why are so many people having success on low carb diets? Well, low carb is actually really good when you are not being physically active. Your body's preferred source of energy for intense activity, carbohydrates. Your body's preferred source of energy for low intensity, nothing doing activity, fat. And we're starting to learn more about that nowadays. So our recommendations for carbohydrates have shifted over the years. It used to be 45 to 65% carbohydrates were the recommendations for every client across the board. Now we're finding it could be as low as 30% for some people. It just depends on how physically active you are. So that's what I mean when I say evidence-based practice, right? It's the use of the best info that we have right now when it comes to client care. So there is a little bit of individual professional expertise. That's like you and me, right? I've got my opinions on the types of things that work best. Eric, yesterday I gave you a big rundown on how I like to do assessments. I usually take 3 sheets of paper, kind of like I did yesterday. I break down the data that I gathered and I lay it out for my clients and I'm like, what do you think would work best for you? Would it be this, this, or this? I give my client a lot of options. Some people might find that totally overwhelming. You know, that could be just an information flood for some people and they don't like it. So I'm actually not saying, so while that worked really well for me and I found that in my career, that's very effective, not everybody likes that approach. That's okay. You know, there's room for both of those things to be correct in this industry. There's also best external evidence, which is, you know, studies and things like that, right? PubMed articles, research studies, meta-analyses, which are probably our best. Those things are actually like really, really valuable as well. Even YouTube videos where someone's like, I did this for 1 year and here's my results. You know what? It may not be the most scientific thing. It is a sample size of 1, but if you find it valuable and you think that it's got a nugget of information, that can actually be okay. And then there is also your client's values and expectations. Guys, you could write the world's greatest program, but if you can't get your client to do it, it is not worth squat. So I get the question all the time, like, hey, what's the best, should I do cardio or strength first? And I'm like, what do you like to do first? Now, scientifically, from the best external evidence, it has been shown that you should do your strength training first, your cardio second. Because you want to get your most intense stuff out of the way first. In most research studies, that has been shown to be the most effective every single time. However, my good friend Josh would rather run 3 miles than do 10 push-ups. That is true, by the way. I'm not even making that up. That is like, he's a good friend of mine. I play Ultimate with him. And we have talked about this many times. He hates strength training. So when he goes to the gym, whoa, what was that? I saw you unmute for a second, but he hates strength training, loves cardio. So when he goes to the gym, I'm like, do your cardio first, do your strength training second. And that
excuse me.
Yes, what's up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because you right now just turned my mind upside down because from what I learned before, and my mom did sports before, there's something called warm up before you do strength training or any stretching, and that's kind of a cardio.
That's fair.
Like you have to run a little bit or swim a little bit or like do some just body exercises,
Yes.
you know, before, like you have to get your muscles warm. You see, like same thing with massage. Before you go deep, you have to warm up the body.
Yes, I'm talking about like a 20-minute cardio session, like a cardio workout. If you're going to do a cardio and strength training workout on the same day. Now, to address your warm-up question, yeah, we actually used to believe that it's really important to do a traditional like 5 to 10 minutes on the treadmill, elliptical, spin bike, rowing machine, whatever, right? Maybe not swim, just because you would have to change twice.
No, just saying,
But yeah,
you know,
you would
whatever.
do a warm-up session. Yeah. So the old edition of the NASM, actually, before you guys came in, the sixth, fifth, fourth, whatever editions, when I got certified was the third. You go back, and NASM used to have rules on you want to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes on a piece of cardio equipment to get your core temperature higher. That makes all of your stretches more effective. Then you get into your strength training. But even that has changed, actually. Now we're finding that the stretching itself gets you pretty warm and heats up the body enough. So that's actually a pretty decent warm up. And then if you follow that up with a few dynamic stretches here and there, that gets you even warmer. So we actually don't need that.
If you don't warm up, your recovery is more painful, the way I know it from my own experience.
Yeah.
Because I did both like with a personal trainer. Sometimes they would put me just on the string training, or like on a cardio and like good warm up, and then like strength training. Sorry for my language. Anyways, but I noticed that if I warm up, then I feel better the next day, you know, when I'm recovering.
Yes.
That's the whole point of it.
So it traditionally used to be, yeah, just like 5 minutes on the treadmill, then we get into our strength training. But we actually have changed that up a little bit. So Elena, I want you to experience this. Actually, this will be fun. I want you to. Both of us are going to be responsible for remembering. We're going
Honestly, just disappearing for some
We'll
reason.
We'll do our own little experiment at Sochi. And I'll run you through the old style warm up. Throw you on the treadmill for 5, stretch you out for 5. And then hit the strength training. And then we'll try the new version, which is throw you on the stretching for 5, throw you on some dynamic stretching for another 5. So stretching plus stretching, no treadmill. And then we'll get you to do your strength training. You tell me what's better.
Thank you.
So, but you're right. That is how we used to do it. And for the record, you should never just jump straight onto your strength training equipment. That we can eliminate from all stuff. But until, I don't know, maybe some study comes out later that says it's better. But as of now, that doesn't exist. So yeah. What I mean is, like, your client expectations, your client values. Some people have things that they like, and maybe that disagrees with the best external evidence. Maybe it disagrees with your personal experience, right? As a trainer. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. Put it all together. That's what evidence-based practice actually is. So it is individual, professional experience. That's you guys. It is best external evidence, like studies, and it is also your client values and expectations. All of it's really valuable, guys. It's all really good. So before we get, I'm already so far over, but I do want to have one quick video. Why is nutrition so complex? Is that the one? Where are you? Not that one. It's certainly not the half-hour one. There we go. So here's a really good video that I think is going to have a really good perspective on what we just said. We'll watch this, then I'll give you guys 10. And we'll be back after that.
That first time you take a step back.
I made that.
With your very own online store.
It seems like it's practically impossible to get a straight answer on whether a given food or supplement is good for you. First, they say red wine is good for you. Then there's a headline announcing that it doesn't do anything. And wait, isn't alcohol supposed to cause cancer? If you wanted to change up your diet to accommodate all of the latest news reports, you wouldn't get very far before you'd run into all kinds of contradictions. I mean, you can't both drink and not drink alcohol at the same time. And the problem goes deeper than the over-exaggerated headlines on cable news. Often, the way nutrition research is done makes it really hard to translate the results into practical advice because of imperfect comparisons. The effects of one compound might not be the same as the effects of the entire food. What happens in other animals might be different from what happens in humans, and a food that's good for you in some ways might be bad for you in others. But it is possible to untangle all that by examining these studies more closely. You just need to know what you're looking for. Take what happened with raspberries not too long ago. In a 2011 study, researchers in China found that red raspberries could improve blood pressure. And then in 2013, a team in Finland found that fresh berries didn't affect blood pressure at all. There are plenty of differences between these two studies, though, and plenty of reasons they might have had different results. The Chinese study used raspberry extract and was done on rats, specifically a strain of rats prone to high blood pressure, whereas the Finnish study used berry puree, and the subjects were humans with symptoms that increased their risk of heart disease, like high blood pressure. The first problem with comparing them is that the other ingredients in the berries could have interfered with the effects of the compounds in the raspberry extract alone. Then there's the whole humans versus other animals thing. One reason scientists use animal models is that you can control everything about them. You can administer every speck of food they eat, control how much they exercise, and monitor them day and night. Try to do that with a human and see how long it takes to get punched in the nose. But that means in this case, the humans who got the berries might have been doing or eating something else that negated the effects. Or hypertension-prone rats might be more sensitive to the blood pressure-lowering effects of berries than normal, if somewhat unhealthy, human beings. Comparing those two studies is a little bit like comparing apples and oranges. Or apples and raspberries, I guess. Different types of studies are important. It's usually much easier and safer to test things in other animals before moving on to humans. And scientists in all fields of research rely on multiple lines of evidence to form conclusions. That's how science works. But when it comes to nutrition, most individual studies are intended as a piece of a larger research puzzle, not something for the home consumer to take to the grocery store. Studies on humans might be easier to translate to your life, but even those are fraught with complications. Like when a 2014 study on red wine contradicted the findings of another paper from 2 years earlier. Both studies were specifically concerned with a compound in wine called resveratrol, which is an antioxidant, meaning it helps prevent potentially damaging chemical reactions in cells. In 2012, a randomized controlled trial by Hungarian researchers found that adults who received resveratrol supplements showed an improvement in a bunch of signs of cardiovascular disease. Randomized control trials, or RCTs for short, are the closest you can get to a controlled experiment in humans without the aforementioned nose punching and a whole passel of ethics violations. Participants are sorted into groups and statistically randomized so that the experiment and control groups are as uniform as possible. Then you give the experimental group the food or supplement or specialized diet you're studying, which should ideally be the only thing that's different between the two groups. And this RCT seemed to show that resveratrol made a difference. But then, in 2014, an observational study of adults in Italy didn't find any effects of resveratrol on signs of cardiovascular disease or mortality. Observational studies are different from RCTs. They aren't really experiments. They involve gathering data that's already out there. In this case, by interviewing people about their eating habits and analyzing their urine. RCTs are usually thought of as the most rigorous type of human study. But that doesn't mean they're always right, and observational studies are always wrong. The 2014 observational study found that while participants had a lot of resveratrol in their diets, like from wine, the stuff might not have reached a high enough concentration in their bodies to have any biological effect. So the lesson there might be that supplements are more effective. Which brings us to a fairly infamous example from the field of cancer nutrition. Beta-carotene is a dietary precursor to vitamin A, found in foods like carrots and sweet potatoes. A body of evidence from multiple observational studies suggests that eating fruits and vegetables rich in beta-carotene lowers the risk of lung cancer, which was the justification for a number of clinical trials, including one in Finland in 1994 and one in the US in 1996, which gave beta-carotene supplements to smokers. Except the smokers who got beta-carotene had a higher rate of lung cancer. You really don't want to give your study population cancer, so this came as a bit of a shock. In the fallout, it was found that beta-carotene in high doses could actually act as a pro-oxidant, a compound that's the opposite of an antioxidant, and promotes chemical reactions that lead to cellular damage. So the observational studies showed that carrots are good for most of us, but the clinical trials discovered that under specific circumstances, high doses of beta-carotene have a pro-cancerous effect. These findings weren't exactly contradicting each other. It was just another case of comparing the wrong things. So that's another thing to look out for with nutrition studies. When you dig into the details, findings that seem contradictory might turn out to be building on each other. The final, and probably most important, question to ask when you see a report announcing that something is good for you is, what does good for you even mean? There's no universally agreed upon definition for it, and it's never what researchers specifically set out to study. Trying to figure out whether something is good for you is just too broad. Studies might look at rates of stomach cancer after a certain number of years, blood glucose levels, cholesterol levels, or any of the other incredibly specific markers related to cancer, or diabetes, or obesity, or some other health issue. Scientists who study nutrition call these outcomes, and they're probably the most important thing to look at in any nutrition study. Going back to the wine example, red wine contains a whole bunch of plant compounds that are targets for nutrition research. Resveratrol is just one of them. At the risk of stating the obvious, wine also contains alcohol. And alcohol itself might actually be good for you in some very specific ways. A 2002 analysis of several dozen studies of the effects of wine and beer found that overall, wine drinkers were less likely to die from heart disease or to experience other, less fatal heart problems. But the association was there for beer drinkers too. It was statistically weaker, but clearly the effect wasn't just coming from the special plant compounds in wine. This finding has cropped up more than once, and there's enough evidence that some nutrition experts might recommend light or moderate alcohol consumption to help prevent cardiovascular disease. Does that mean alcohol is good for you? Well, I mean, it's alcohol. Even if it helps your cardiovascular system, it also messes with your liver, interferes with fetal development, increases your risk for certain cancers, depresses your central nervous system, and a whole list of other things. In some of these cases, the dose makes the poison. The evidence points towards light or moderate drinking having certain positive effects, but heavy drinking being bad in basically every way. While alcohol is an extreme example, it's not hard to find cases where a particular food or nutrient has a positive effect on some outcomes and a negative effect on others. These studies aren't contradicting each other because they're not trying to answer whether something is universally good for you. But when the findings show up in the news, sometimes that nuance gets lost in translation. When it comes to nutrition research, there are so many seemingly contradictory findings coming out all the time that even the scientists publishing them need to step back and look at the evidence as a whole. That's why the field is full of review articles and meta-analyses. The process of science is pretty much always this messy. But for some reason, with nutrition, it's on public display. Maybe that's because we want to be able to justify our craft brew hobby by believing it's healthy, or because we're always looking for ways to live longer and stave off diseases. Maybe it's because what we eat feels like the one thing we can control in a world full of unknown risks. But it helps to take every individual nutrition study with a grain of salt. Not too big of a grain, though. I just read that salt is bad for you. Or was it good for you? Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow, which is produced by Complex.
True irony of that, by the way, is that there is actually a pretty big growing evidence in the last like 2 years about like the benefits of increasing your salt intake, which is in very just a great way to end that. I love that. I want us to keep perspective on that video right there. I think it's a really good example of like, you know, what our entire industry is like. You know what I mean? Elena, just to use you as an example one more time, I remember one of the conversations we had just before winter break was about like, you know, whether or not massage guns have been shown to be like effective or ineffective. And you know, massage guns can actually have a pretty positive benefit if you do them right.
This call may be monitored
Unfortunately,
or
they tend to
recorded. You are now in our
they tend to tighten things up a lot in the first like 90 seconds because they are pretty violent, you know, the pounding. But if you hold it for about 2 minutes, it has a pretty good inhibitory effect, similar to that of massage. So it is kind of interesting, you know, sometimes it's the variables that really make things. All right, guys, I have blown through the break, as is my custom. The rest of this actually moves much quicker. We sort of set the mission today. Hopefully set the tone of things pretty clearly so far. Let's give you guys 10 minutes, and we'll be back, and we'll move through the rest of the easy parts of this chapter. Copy. All right, guys. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up the rest of this chapter here. We are looking at the OPT model here. I know a lot of you guys, we have already talked about this before, but next thing that is obviously very, very important in our notes here is understanding how NASM's OPT model actually operates. So the OPT model is an evidence-based example here, model for helping clients achieve a wide range of goals, right? And that could be weight loss, it could be improved health, strength, muscle mass, and athletic performance. It is going to be broken down into three levels, which we've talked about before. That's going to be the stabilization level, strength level, and power level. And it is broken into 5 phases, right? And that's going to be stabilization, endurance, strength endurance, muscular development, maximal strength, and lastly, power. So the way this works, if you kind of think about it, the levels are going to give you exercise selection options, and the phases are going to give you acute variable options. So what do I mean when I say that? Well, like, and there's a difference between, you know, if we sort of look at these 3 exercises here, right? Let's look at a Bosu ball squat on a little GIF here, right? This is obviously a pretty unstable variation of the squat, right? You can see even in this variation here, she's wobbling a little bit just at the feet as she's doing it, right? Not talking about whether or not it's a good squat. We're just saying it's a wobbly one, right? If she masters that, stop jumping her chest and arching her back so much. So we'll end up in a really good spot and we can learn how to do a barbell squat. And that's also going to be pretty effective, right? This barbell variation here, right? Very, very good for piling a lot of weight on, can get very heavy. And then eventually we can get into something like a squat jump if we get to the power level. So all 3 of those exercises, oh, I hate that version. Do not throw your arms down on squat jumps. That drives me crazy. So all 3 of those are leg exercises. They're all squat patterns. They're all very, very good for you. So how do you know which one to use with each individual client? Well, it depends on what level they're in, right? It's the new year, guys. It's 2024. Again, I may not be the biggest New Year's resolution guy in the world, although I do love just like a fun, goofy theme. My wife, this is one of the things that made me fall in love with my wife, like on our friggin' first date. Is like we were talking and like randomly she was like, I just love a theme, and I was like, speak to me more. But like we both kind of love like a good like central theme for things. So like my central theme for January is always like it's you know, return to stabilization. You know, it's the beginning of the year, start fresh. I always love to go into a stabilization routine. And a lot of people are like, ugh, it's the beginner's routine. I don't want to do stabilization. Guys, stabilization's freaking hard. I would argue that it is the hardest phase if done correctly. Well, strength endurance, actually, in my opinion, is the hardest phase. But it's just because it's the beginner's phase doesn't mean it's the easy phase. Like those are not the same word. You know, it's kind of like a marathon is not very intense, you know, which is a weird way to talk about it. That does not mean the marathon is not freaking hard. It's incredibly difficult. It's just not very intense. You're doing very little effort a million times, you know, whereas like sprinting is very intense, but the event's over in 10 seconds. So, you know, so like just it's a word that means what we often don't think it means, you know. Intense is not the same as hard. Well, beginner is not the same as easy. It just means that it's what we emphasize when we're trying to set a foundation. That's what the beginning of something is. So not always just easy. So I love it. I think that, like, you know, stabilization is a great place. So I'm going to make sure that I pick unstable varieties of exercises. And then based on being in phase 1, because that's the only option in level 1, I'm also going to do relatively high repetition schemes. I'm also going to make sure that I take fairly limited rest. And I'm probably going to do things in a circuit or at least superset variety. Things that are going to be very good for my endurance. So we're going to go more into that, obviously, as we get into our actual program design classes, which I know we've been in a little bit here and there, but always trying to make those as clear as possible. That's what NASM's OPT model is. So in the NASM OPT model, you are going to pair that with NASM's OPT template. And the OPT template is a way to design and organize an optimal fitness program using NASM's OPT model. So the OPT template is going to allow you to use the OPT model. It is going to be broken into several different phases as well. And when I say phases, I don't mean NASM phases. I mean, it's going to be broken into, hold on. It's going to be broken into a warm-up section where you are going to address things like flexibility and mobility. It is going to be, which we talked about the importance of earlier, it's going to be focused into an activation section where you are going to address core and balance. It's going to be broken into a skill development section where you are going to address reactive / plyometric training and SAQ, which is speed, agility, and quickness. And then lastly, and arguably most importantly, you're going to get into your resistance section where you are going to address total body strength, total body, chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and of course, leg strength training. And then lastly, we've got our cool down where again, we are going to address flexibility and mobility. I'm going to take the word reactive out of there just because NASM they have pretty much eliminated the word reactive from their vocabulary by the 7th edition. This is how I know I'm getting older. I've got my old crotchety opinions. I like the word reactive better because I think it paints a better picture because it's about reacting explosively to something. But that word has just slowly gone out of style in the fitness industry, and now we pretty much exclusively use the word plyometric. But I like reactive better because it's about reacting. So we're like a reactive molecule. So yeah, so that is, what we're here to learn, right? We want to really make sure we master NASM's OPT model and OPT template and use those things to write really effective programs. I actually don't use NASM's OPT template directly as often anymore. With like my own sort of workout style, I will use just a lot of basic traditional workout programs. Those are my clients. I have them use, if you go to Amazon, you can see workout journal. I've bought this 2-pack like 15 times. Not that many, actually. I'll probably say like 4 or 5. But this little fitness tracker right here, I love it. I think it is super great. Not touting Amazon or anything like that, but I've purchased this 2-pack 6 times. And it's just a really helpful journal that's got all the boxes and spaces that I think a workout journal needs, and so this has been it's $8. I'll give it to my client. Sometimes or I'll usually encourage them to buy their own. And it's just really helpful. So I actually don't necessarily directly use NASM's OPT templates anymore, but all of those principles that you get from mastering that template, I use directly on a standard sheet of paper. So still very, very effective. Eric, you can see we did that a little bit yesterday, right? We didn't even necessarily dive into a direct OPT yesterday. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about defining like health and disease, right? So there's a really interesting sort of chart here that the WHO puts out. This is the World Health Organization. And we've kind of come to understand that like the idea of health is not like a static condition. I think this is really well personified when we talk about like high blood pressure. I don't know if anybody in here has a family with a history of hypertension or high blood pressure. I know that I don't necessarily have a history of it on my family, but my mom certainly suffers from high blood pressure. And it's kind of it's interesting. It's got a nickname. If anybody knows it, it's the silent killer. And it's kind of a spooky nickname. It sounds like a Paul Anderson movie or something. But sorry, Paul W.S. Anderson, the scary one, the Resident Evil not the Magnolia guy. And it's the idea that like health hypertension is a silent killer because it takes you out in a lot of other ways slowly over the years. So like having high blood pressure damages your kidneys a little bit every day, just a little. And you don't really notice it. Doesn't really have much of an impact for years and years and years and years until finally it has a major impact. So it kind of sneaks up on you. And so we're finding that like health is very dynamic. It's in flux. It moves a lot, right? And the transition between like being healthy and unhealthy is pretty gradual, So you might have like positive health, you might be one of the healthiest people, and then, you start to develop sort of a gradual ache or a pain, right? Maybe your cardio isn't quite as good as it used to be, little things like that. And then, you might like get sick here and there a couple times a year and notice things like that. And it's like, okay, well, it's still like in a pretty good spot. And then it's like our standards sort of change as we get older sometimes, or even just as we get unhealthier. And it's like, well, I'm healthy because I'm not actively sick. And it's like, I kind of want to get people to move away from that definition, right? Like just because you're not sick doesn't mean you're not healthy. It doesn't mean you are healthy. This isn't like a binary thing to consider, right? Like, like for instance, do you feel like you can do any of like the physical activities that you want to be able to set out and do? That's what I kind of consider to be like health, not just I don't catch a cold, And then obviously there are the more severe versions, right? Unrecognized sickness where people are just not feeling very good in general. They don't really know why. They just feel kind of gunky. Mild sickness, severe sickness, things that have been diagnosed and doctors are probably sort of actively working on. So that's kind of how we've sort of like moved this idea of health. It's not just like, well, I don't want my clients just to be free from unhealth. You know what I mean? Like I want my clients to thrive, There's a really good quote. What was it? What was it? Oh, I'm forgetting it. And I thought of it this morning and I wanted to incorporate it into my lecture. What was it? Hold on. No. Oh man, that sucks. It was something about we are not designed to scrape by. We are designed to thrive, like it was much more elegant than what I just said. I only speak 2 languages and one of them is bad English. So quickly defining health and disease. One of the terms that you are going to hear when it comes to health and disease, 2 major definitions here. One is going to be acute. Acute illness is going to be, this is something that generally happens in a short-term period, right? A medical event or condition that occurs suddenly and can be treated in a short period of time. That is usually within 6 weeks. Is what we generally consider to be something that is acute, right? I sprained my wrist snowboarding this holiday. And so, but you can see it's not quite where I want it to be yet, but that is better than yesterday. It's not quite as flexible as I want it to be yet. I'm still, waiting to do major rehab on it, but at this point I am stretching. And I'll begin, all my regular therapy stuff later. Actually, you can hear I can get to click every time still. That's also not good. But that will go away. And when it happened, everyone was like, oh, and I was like, guys, this is an acute injury. It will be fine by Valentine's Day. I am not super concerned about it. So that is, that's what we consider to be an acute injury. But chronic injuries, these are the ones we are more worried about. This is what we are trying to avoid. And so chronic illness, we're going to define as a disease or condition that persists for a longer duration. Generally, 3 months or longer. This is generally something that cannot be prevented by a vaccine or cured with a general medication. If you have an illness and your doctor prescribes a medication and says, hey, this is going to go away, but it's probably going to take 6 months, that is still actually probably not necessarily going to be classified as a chronic disease, even though obviously 6 months is longer than 6 weeks and longer than 3 months, right? But the treatment is going to take place. They're very confident that it is going to work within the next period. They still don't necessarily consider that to be a chronic illness either. This is something that, something like heart disease, right? The fallout of heart disease is going to last a very long time. And while medication can help, it doesn't necessarily go away on its own. So they do consider that to be chronic. So taking a look at different chronic illnesses and diseases, this chart is a general chart. I think this is from 2019 actually, or 2018. Don't try to look this chart up right now. In the last few years, COVID is going to goof all of this up. But generally, if we look at like the number of like chronic diseases and conditions that cause death, we are going to see ischemic heart disease and stroke as being the #1 and #2 killers, and then a massive drop from there. We're going to get into COPD. So we are seeing the top 3 are all cardiorespiratory disease, lower respiratory infections. That is still a respiratory thing, but it's a little bit more infection based. And you can even see here, that means that it's communicable in the orange category. Then we see Alzheimer's, cancers, diabetes. These are all non-communicable things that can be sort of developed in various different ways. And then friggin' tuberculosis is huge. And if anybody follows Hank or John Green, Lord knows tuberculosis is a much bigger deal than we give it credit for. But yeah, so we are seeing like a lot of these. Now, look at how many of these can sort of be directly combated through diet and exercise, right? We see diabetes, COPD, stroke, and heart disease all immediately directly combated with a healthy diet and exercise program. Now, tracheobronchial and lung cancers, those things, and obviously any of the different types of neoplasms out there, like any cancer, that is not necessarily something that can be directly treated with exercise or diet. However, we have seen there are definitely positive impacts on those things from diet and exercise. And the causes of those things, unfortunately, are just a little bit too complex for us to fully understand just yet. But we do know there are certain things that we can do to sort of combat those things. Protect yourself from sun damage, making sure that you are generally relatively active. And then one of the things they talked about in the video on nutrition we watched earlier, resveratrol is a antioxidant. Antioxidants can theoretically have a very positive impact on combating different types of neoplasms. The process by which they do that is really interesting. Basically, they have extra electrons. That's what makes them an antioxidant. And so they are willing to sort of donate that electron, and hopefully that will keep a free radical, which is like a really aggressive molecule that wants to strip electrons from its surrounding environment. and can sort of keep them from doing any damage. You know, you eat something that, or get something into your body that happens to be a free radical, it's going to cause oxidative stress and damage to everything around it in the universe in general. If that happens to be your body and what gets damaged happens to be your DNA, well, that's how we can sometimes end up with certain non-functioning cells. Antioxidants sort of prevent that by donating extra electrons to sort of prevent that process, theoretically. But again, this is something that we are not able to necessarily track directly. So we look at like the preventable causes of death, and it's like things that are associated with all of those diseases. Tobacco and smoking is causing over 400,000 deaths a year. It is something that we simply don't have to do. I will say it is crazy to me living in the year 2024 that smoking, vaping, or anything of the like still exists. It blows my mind. You know, but it is there, right? It is a very, very common thing. So again, like if you're looking for a New Year's resolution, tobacco, getting that out of your life in all of its varieties can be a great priority numero uno for you, is what I always tell my clients. And really, guys, I am against smoking pretty much in all of its forms. Now, that being said, I know that there are some major benefits to like cannabis usage and things like that. I actually will not refute any of those. I think it's actually, there are some really cool things that cannabis and CBD and things like that can do. However, I will not take back what I just said about smoking. It is bad for you always. So if those things are a regular part of your life, maybe consider getting them into your body, not through your lungs. And that is my opinion on things, and we will move on. If you want to talk more about that, by the way, I got a whole rant about it. So then we got overweight and obesity, something that is also very, you know, prevalent, but can be very difficult. This is something that has many causes. And so the idea that like, you know, it's like, oh, well, you should exercise more, you should diet more, you know, like those things are generally good pieces of advice, but man, do they lack perspective, you know? How many times have you guys been watching a YouTube video or a podcast or something like that, and a billionaire will say, stop going to Starbucks every day? You know, it's like, you know, oh yeah, because I've spent $1 million at Starbucks in my life. No, I have not at all. You know, now that being said, what they mean is that like there are ways to be more frugal with your money and things like that. And it is actually decent advice, but it is delivered in the worst way possible. So future trainers / allied health industry professionals, please stop saying you should just diet and exercise more. Please. It does not help any of us. We want to have a much more professional approach to stuff like that. You know, it is a much larger conversation. There are a lot of things that go into struggling with weight and obesity. And while those things can be combated in certain ways through diet and exercise, a lot of times it is also very much a habits thing. Again, you could write the world's greatest routine, but if you can't get someone to do it, it is not worth squat. And then we see a massive drop off, and the rest of them are things like alcohol. Infectious diseases actually does take out a lot of people every year. Not so much. This is actually really frustrating. It does say disease in the world today. This is the US, by the way. I looked these numbers up because infectious diseases would be way higher if you were to look at that on a global scale. Diarrhea and dysentery alone would be probably topping this chart. But yeah, this is a US chart that we are looking at here. So global impact, what does this mean? It means that it costs all of us kind of a lot of money, which is an important part of this conversation. Like I said earlier, I would love to get to a point where trainers are covered under insurance. I think that that actually makes perfect sense. At least in our country, it would save all of us a ton of money if you crunch those numbers. Obviously, it would cost a lot, but the amount of money that it would save us in spending money on diseases would actually balance that out massively, especially because we are seeing a growing retiree population. You know, a lot of like the booming population boom that happened, a lot of boomers, as you put it, are hitting retiring age, and those are individuals who are going to need more and more and more increased healthcare coverage. And if we can prevent those general diseases, those people are not going to be spending that money there. And so if you take a look here at the prevalence of physical inactivity, we are seeing here in the US, massively way higher. About 60% of people 60 years or older do not consider themselves physically active. And I believe that definition is getting 150 minutes of moderate activity per week, AKA they do not get at least 30 minutes of activity 5 days per week. That is not that much activity. So we see definitely see a strong connection there. So the impact that this has is an increase in so many of those chronic diseases that we've been talking about. So a couple terms that we need to be familiar with, and we've been over these before, but we're going to go over them again. A couple terms we're going to see. First one we're going to see is obesity. This is a classification of having a BMI exceeding 30, right? And then we are going to also see the term overweight, which is a classification of having a BMI exceeding 25. Then we are also going to occasionally see underweight, which is that's super helpful almost. A classification of having a BMI under 18.5. So what do I mean when I say BMI? That is your body mass index, or BMI. This is a calculation of height versus weight. And that formula is a formula, guys. Every one of you, I do need you to have this memorized. I can almost promise you this will be a test question, not only in your homeworks, but on your actual NASA. So what is that formula? Well, that is going to be BMI equal, I should put this in italics. BMI equals your weight in kilograms. 0.241. 0.240. Oh, hold on. I don't remember my divide symbol. A BMI, a weight in kilograms divided by your height. Sorry. Oh my God. Divided by your height in meters squared. Just formatting here so that your notes look good when I give them to you. So weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. I know we don't use kilograms and meters that often here in the US, but those are the numbers that they use to actually classify these. Now, you will see in my chart over here, we have obesity class 2 and class 3. Those numbers actually don't matter. They will not test you on those. But here's my advice, guys. If you remember these three things, you don't necessarily have to memorize these numbers directly. As long as you remember that it is underweight is 18.5 and below. Overweight is anything above 25, and obesity is anything above 30. You will be able to figure out those ranges from that information alone, right? It'd be 18.5 to 24.9 is considered normal weight. I hate that term, but there it is. Overweight is 25 to 29.9. Obese is anything greater than. Now, I do not like obesity I do not like BMI as a concept for determining health. I just want to put that out here really quickly. Some of you guys might be very muscular and heavy. It is not taking into account your body fat percentage, cardiovascular health, or anything like that. So while I do not like using BMI as a concept for health, I do think that it is an example of what I like to call putting chips on the table. Right. So like, I hate it when I hear someone say, oh no, I'm overweight because my BMI is here. I must be unhealthy. Right. I don't like that. That's like saying if I go to Vegas and I put, a $100 chip on the roulette table on number 13, because it's my lucky number, right? I'm guaranteed to win. That is very silly gambling. It is very unlikely. You have a 1 in 37 chance, I believe, at that choice. But the more numbers you start putting onto that table, 13, 12, 29, double zeros, 4, 6, 11, 18, the more you start putting up there, the more likely you're going to strike it big. You're going to win, quote unquote, right? The more likely that is to happen, right? So while I don't like BMI as a concept of general health, if someone has an elevated BMI and they have a family history of heart disease and they are not physically active and they have an elevated waist to hip ratio and an elevated body fat percentage, we start to see like more and more things get laid down, and it can sort of paint a picture, right? So that is also a much wider approach we want to take to that thing. However, you need to know this formula to pass your test. I can almost promise you every one of you will have this as a question, because every trainer gets tested on this. I don't think it's that important, but it is tested. So there it is. So then we also see heart disease, right? As sort of our next sort of general condition here. Right, and this is going to be any variation of chronic cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis. And so we will see a lot of times plaque build up on the inside of blood vessels, leading to increased pressure. And that will obviously cause decreased performance. So hypertension, we are going to classify that as high blood pressure or elevated blood pressure. Above 140/90. So that is our sort of medical definition of hypertension there. Anything greater than 140/90, we are going to consider to be hypertensive. So 140/90. So that means anywhere between 135, we consider that to be pre-hypertensive. Now, again, if your blood pressure is higher than these numbers, does that mean that you are chronically ill? Does that mean that you are unhealthy? Not necessarily, it's not direct. However, again, pair that with obesity, pair that with an elevated lipid profile. You start to put all these things together and it starts to paint a picture. We're not worried about your blood pressure being high in general, I'm sorry, we're not worried about your blood pressure being high at a random time. What we're worried about is your blood pressure being high consistently. Your blood pressure gets over like 180 when you're deadlifting. Like it goes through the freaking roof when you're exercising. That's fine. That's what blood pressure is supposed to do. What we're worried about is when you're doing nothing and you're elevated, right? That's why your doctor has you sit for 5 minutes before they take that test. Cholesterol, this is also referred to as hyperlipidemia. Elevated cholesterol or triglycerides in the blood is what we're talking about there. So we used to think that it was all related to our diet. Pretty much everything that you ate that had cholesterol in it was to be avoided. Eggs are bad for you. You know, nowadays we know that your dietary cholesterol probably doesn't have quite as big of an impact on you. However, that doesn't mean that like foods that are super high in saturated fat are necessarily the healthiest thing in the world. Because they are extremely high in calories. So when your body is elevating your cholesterol to really extreme levels, yes, that can definitely result in that atherosclerosis and plaque buildup on the inside of those blood vessels. Ideally, we want to keep that cholesterol around 60 milligrams per deciliter of blood. And we want to keep that LDL cholesterol less than 100 milligrams per deciliter of blood. Two types of cholesterol, guys. HDL, which is the high density stuff, and LDL, which is the low density stuff. Think of it as HDL is like high density, it's like hyper, and it knocks the bad cholesterol off your walls, cleans out your blood vessels, right? It's really full of protein, it's really good for you. Low density cholesterol, think of it as lazy density cholesterol. It's very full of fat, it doesn't have very much protein, and it likes to park itself on your blood vessels and kind of get stuck and build up with all of its buddies. Then we've also got diabetes. By definition here is going to be a condition whereby a client suffers from impaired glucose control. This is going to come in two different varieties here. We're going to see type 1 diabetes, which is what we call insulin dependent diabetes or juvenile diabetes. It is generally due to damage of the pancreas. So basically your pancreas is not putting out enough insulin. And so then sugar stays in your blood longer than it's supposed to, and it becomes really hard to pull that sugar out of there. Then we got type 2 diabetes, which is what we refer to as non-insulin dependent or insulin resistant diabetes. Non-insulin resistant. Oh, basically, the difference between these two, if you have type 1 diabetes, is generally due to some version of an autoimmune disorder or maybe damage that happened to the pancreas, so it can no longer spit out insulin the way it's supposed to. Insulin's job, by the way, is to pull sugar out of your blood and drive it into your cells to be processed for energy or stored for later use. If you leave that sugar floating around in your blood, your body can't function very well. Your cells can't do what they're supposed to do. The analogy that I always use, guys, imagine if I just like broke into your house right now with like a dump truck and I just filled your room that you're in with like a bunch of like white granulated sugar. You're still going to be like fine and alive and able to kind of do some stuff, but it's going to make everything in your life a little bit harder. That's kind of what having elevated blood sugar is like. You heal more slowly, your immune system doesn't function quite as well. It's difficult to deliver oxygen to your cells. It can cause like a lot of different problems. Type 2 diabetes is where your body is actually making insulin. And so every time your blood sugar goes up, your body makes plenty of insulin. But unfortunately, because you've done that so often, it's kind of like a boy who cried wolf situation, where your body's cells no longer respond to that insulin. And so the sugar just kind of stays in your blood and causes all the same types of problems. So that is why we are, very worried about this condition. Next one we've got is cancer in general. This is probably the most difficult one to talk about, considering that there are so many different varieties and ways that it sort of impacts people. you know, you hear it all the time. It's like, why can't we cure this friggin' thing? What's the conspiracy there? Why haven't we figured this out? It's because as a society, we sort of all agreed to just call it this one disease, but in reality, it is like, I think it's more than 50 actually. It's a ton of diseases. And they all are very, very, very different. They all affect things very, very different ways. But in general, which I do not like, but we'll say, it is a disease where cells in the body grow abnormally, often creating, I'm going to say malignant neoplasms, just because I like that much better, that can grow aggressively and damage the body. So there are more than, it's right there in my PowerPoint slide. It is definitely more than 50. There are more than 100 types of cancers out there. So oftentimes this affects older adults. However, in other varieties, you know, this can happen at really any age. But there are sort of two general strategies. Like I said, regular exercise can be very effective because that is actually going to keep your immune system in tip-top shape. And then eating a healthy diet. Now, when we say healthy diet, that's like one of those things where it's like, well, do you mean like lots of healthy fats so that I can work on my cholesterol? Actually, what we mean by a healthy diet in this case is a colorful diet, is the simplest way that I can think about it. Guys, try to get as much color into your diet as possible because, fun fact, the colors in plants, they don't really do anything. Like vitamin A is going to be used for eye health. Vitamin E is going to be used for skin health. The stuff that makes plants kind of pretty and colorful and vegetables like fun to look at doesn't actually do anything in terms of like our body, which is a really good thing. Because if they're not doing anything, those chemicals that give those plants those colors can be used to combat these things that are damaging us. We don't need to use them to keep our bones healthy. We don't need to use those phytochemicals to keep our skin functioning or metabolize, right? We need glucose, we need fats, we need protein, right? We need all those things to be used for like general day-to-day living. Phytochemicals, they're awesome because they don't actually have to have any other function in the body except for combating free radicals. So we're a huge fan. Basically, it works like this. Let me just show you free radical and antioxidant. Here's a really, really simple example of what I mean. A free radical basically wants to steal this electron right here from this healthy atom. This guy's missing an electron, so he wants to steal it. Antioxidants, because they're not doing anything else, they are happy to give their electrons away and fill that outer shell. And now that free radical isn't going to damage our healthy atoms that make up our DNA. It's a cartoony, silly image, guys, but it actually explains things pretty freaking well. That is, good Lord, look at that one. That's going to haunt my dreams. So yeah, that is why antioxidants are so good for us. So when I say healthy diet, I don't necessarily mean the right macros. I don't necessarily mean lots of vitamins and minerals. What I mean is like a diet that is rich in color. And I will say fiber as well, at least for my male students out there and, you know, your male clients. Lots of fiber is good for everybody in general. But colon cancer, a little bit more common in men. That is one that you can combat directly by simply getting enough fiber in your diet. And that one's pretty easy to sort of talk about. Next one we got is respiratory disease. Lots of varieties of this as well. The biggest one we're going to see is like COPD. But this is going to be chronic. Actually, I should just put COPD in here. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. A disease by which an individual has impaired oxygen delivery due to scar tissue or other materials covering lung tissue. So this could be phlegm, it could be tar, it could be all kinds of different things. Emphysema is going to be literally materials causing inflammation of the tubes that lead to your lungs, those little bronchioles and alveoli. Or chronic bronchitis can actually be a lung infection where your immune system's like, ah, and then it does what it normally does, which is just like generally cover stuff in mucus. Sounds bad. I know we all hate being snotty and phlegmy when we're sick, but that is actually a really good thing to keep a disease from being able to replicate. But if that happens in your lungs, that can cause like deeper infection, unfortunately. And then stress is a really big one here as well. This is insane that this has had to slowly make its way into the NASM editions. But this was not part of those text. This chapter, by the way, has been in every NASM edition since I got certified. And stress is the only new addition to this chapter. But stress levels in the workplace, especially, we are seeing like major work-related stress is causing such severe postural distortions and anxieties that it is actually resulting in, again, heart disease, stroke, and all kinds of like general just like aches and pains. Here's the thing, guys. It is okay to use your traps, your pecs. It is okay to use those things, your sternocleidomastoid, your scalenes. All of those are there to help you breathe when you're doing something really explosive and athletic. But if you are tricking your body into thinking that you're fighting off a bear, when in reality you're trying to get that spreadsheet turned in on time to your boss who's yelling at you every day, you're not doing anything physically active, but you are sitting there like this going, and these are posture muscles as well. So you start altering your posture, right? And then that starts causing postural distortions, which cause tension headaches and lead to all kinds of harmful effects on the body. So stress is slowly killing us. You want to hear a really good documentary about that? Check out the documentary Happy on Netflix, or maybe it was Happy Inc., but I think it's just Happy. Fascinating stuff. And then we've got finally our last sort of thing here in terms of dysfunction, friggin' injuries. So I'm actually not going to put these in our notes today because we are going to cover these better later. But we look at our common dysfunctions. We've got ankle sprains and plantar fasciitis in the foot and ankle complex. We got patellar tendonitis, ACL tears, MCL tears in the knees, low back pain like herniations and stuff like that in the LPHC, shoulder impingement in the shoulders or rotator cuff tears, and then general headaches and neck pain and forward head posture in the nook. And look at this chart. This looks pretty friggin' familiar to what we were doing just before Christmas break. Foot and ankle complex, knee, LPHC, shoulders, and neck. So we have our little healthcare continuum here. These are the allied health professionals I mentioned earlier, right? We've got hospitals, ambulances. We've got all kinds of different therapists out there. We've got ancillary facilities like dentists and ophthalmologists, long-term care, medical practitioners, behavior change specialists, and then all of us, Group X instructors, performance specialists, new coaches, nutritionists, and then obviously trainers. All of these are going to be in terms of healthcare. And if you think about it, this is very much the preventative stuff that hopefully keeps you from having to meet with any of these other folks. I don't know how much of a benefit it would have on the dentists, but you know, don't grit your teeth while you're lifting. All right. So last little thing I want to end with for our first chapter here, before we knock out the second one, is our scope of practice, right? So what is our scope of practice? It's complicated. There is actually a lot of this, and sadly, it is not in my PowerPoint. So it is barely in your textbook. Jen, I see you looking directly at that textbook right now. You will notice we are pretty much at the end of this chapter. There's a little bit more. Your scope of practice, guys, is something that you will be given much more clearly when you actually get your test codes. It's one of those things that NASM doesn't give you until the very end to ensure that you read your little handbook. There's a little PDF handbook. However, it's on the internet, which is kind of nice. This is actually where you used to find that exam blueprint. Oh, actually, did I click the wrong? Nope, there it is. So it's got some stuff here. For the most part, it's pretty simple. It'll go over like how to take your test and things like that. Like I said, these are things that you guys are going to see at the very end. It will talk about like what your certification eligibility is, and then like you know, how to use your exam blueprints, where to find it. Which, by the way, it always says it's on nasm.org, but that's not descriptive enough. It is, but it's in the download section. And then it'll talk about like your cut scores. A cut score is the minimum score needed. You need at least 70%. So 70 out of those 100. And then it will talk briefly about like those 20 survey questions and stuff. But I will fill you in just really quickly on terms of scope of practice. This is what we're going to go over in the next chapter. So professionalism. How do you be a professional? Well, it means giving what we call uncompromised customer service, right, to your clients. Uncompromised means you are going above and beyond in terms of being a trainer, but you are not stepping out of what a trainer would not do. I had a client one time ask me to help walk their dog while they cleaned up the training area in the gym, because they didn't want me to like clean their house. They thought that was really weird, but they were comfortable enough asking me to walk their dog. Now I want to keep my client, but I'm also not a professional dog walker. So I super said no. However, I helped them clean up the gym because that is where I was going to be actively working anyways. That like a little patio gym thing. And then I was like, but that ate into their session time. And then I walked with them and took their dog around the block, and we used that as their cardio warm-up. That is me going about as far as I'm willing to when it comes to stepping outside of, I wouldn't step outside my scope of practice, but that's about as far as I will go in terms of customer service for a client. And then you will bet that I actually purposefully ended that session on time. I could have gone longer, but I specifically chose not to. So that is a big part of like what we mean. You can be professional, but you do want to make sure you keep that line. I've definitely had situations where I have fired clients as clients before, but I still have them in my life. I have a good friend of mine, and it's one of those things where it's like, look, you know what, like these lines have gotten blurred, and that is partially my fault, partially your fault. But like, I don't think we should train anymore, you know? And that's what happens. You want to make sure that you do have like a line. This is a professional relationship. You can be friendly, absolutely. But you shouldn't be going to like Dodger games and having a beer and a terrible hot dog with your client that you're helping on a weight loss journey. That's completely inappropriate. So that is a big part of like professionalism. There's also confidentiality. You do not share information about clients with other clients. Obviously, that's a big one. We can kind of move past that. Legal and ethical. You should not be shorting your clients consistently for session times. Obviously, it's a pretty hard industry. Sometimes it can be difficult to get your appointments to like land specifically where they're supposed to. But there is like a legal and ethical way to approach that. And then lastly, is just your general business practice. You want to make sure that you are not doing things that you are not legally trained to do. For instance, giving specific meal plans. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Giving specific, you know, if my client's got like a, ankle sprain and they walk into the gym and they're like, hey, do you have any Advil, right? As a normal person, I can totally give it to them. That is actually legal, but it is important for me to make sure that I don't say, hey, take this Advil for your ankle inflammation. I know that sounds weird, but again, I need to make sure that I verbally do not draw that connection. That's part of that legal stuff. There's a difference between prescription and general information advice. Lots of times I've had friends sprain their ankles on the ultimate pitch. like when we're playing and stuff, and they're like, hey, what do I do for my sprained ankle? And I'm like, you go see a doctor. But once your doctor tells you specifically what's wrong with it, you can come back to me and I'll give you some advice on how to keep it from happening again. That's my scope of practice. I do not heal sprained ankles, but I will fix your generally goofy posture. And if that makes your ankle pain go away, awesome. There is a difference, right? I do not treat diabetes, but I've worked with probably 15 people at this point in my career who have had diabetes go away and they no longer need insulin. I would never say that I got their, would never ever use the sentence, I cured their diabetes, but many, many clients that I've had who were extremely obese, who have lost a lot of weight over the years, no longer are insulin dependent. That is a difference. It's all about how you talk about things, guys. We are not here to cure things. We are not doctors. So that is all going to be made much clearer in that handbook, like I said, but that is that scope of practice. So chapter 1, you learned what a CPT is, a little bit about how to understand how this industry is rapidly growing, how advances in technology are making our lives amazing and slowly killing us. Now the cat box is out to get me. We talked a little bit about, we actually didn't talk about portion sizes, but we did talk about how we have an environment that is leading to increased overweight and obesity, and that is leading to certain chronic illnesses. And we talked about like our role as a coach. So questions, comments, concerns about chapter 1. How y'all feeling?
Good. It was like, it's very straightforward. Chapter
Love
1,
that.
basics. Yeah.
I also feel like I'm always like, here's the mission in chapter 1. Like, it's like, all right, get it together. We got people to save. All right. Well, awesome, guys. Let's give you a few. We'll come back and we'll knock out the easier of these 2 chapters today. I won't do as much grandstanding in chapter 2.
Oh, I actually had a question.
Yes.
Sorry, about the quiz.
Yes.
When do we do that quiz?
Yeah, so there is going to be a paper copy up on NASM that you can download with a giant pool of questions that I will be giving you the answers to tomorrow, like after class, which is why it'll have like a specific due date. However, the actual quiz will be on Canvas itself, and it'll be like a hit these answers. That's the actual homework portion. But you'll have a giant pool of way more than you need questions. That is one thing about the homework. I'm going to make that clear at the end of class, Eric. But there are like 2 things that say quiz. One is your homework. The other one is a giant pool of questions for you to have as a resource.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not going to give you, I think between the 2, it's like 90 questions. I'm not going to give you that as homework that is due by midnight tonight. You know what I mean? Like that would be,
I mean, never know, never know.
no, not me, not NASM, but I do want you to have a giant pool of questions so that like you can use them as flashcards and you can study, and you know, they're very, very helpful. But no, I would not. No, it'll be 20 questions. 10 from chapter 1, 10 from chapter 2. But yeah, take 10, guys. Let's take 10 and we'll come back and knock out the rest of this. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive on into chapter 2 here. Copy this. Formatting. To personal training. Okay. Learning objectives for chapter 2. We want to discover our employment opportunities for entry-level fitness professionals. It's so funny because I'm going to be doing this lesson, this exact PowerPoint in my PFT core class in like 6 days. Craft a professional resume and hone our interviewing skills. Describe the most common daily tasks for fitness professionals. Develop a marketing strategy to fuel client growth and identify any opportunities in education in the fitness industry. So if we're talking about the landscape in general here, back over here, and then that probably assumed double. Nope, good. We are seeing that like we are projecting personal training job growth over the upcoming years, right? Like we are seeing this industry continue to get like bigger and bigger. Like I said, a lot of individuals are getting to that retiring age. That means that like these are people who have worked really hard their entire life and they finally have time, you know, they've been taking care of their kids for years, and then they had to work for the remaining years. And now finally, they have got all this extra time on their hands. They're retired. They get to take care of themselves for once. And it's a really great like time to like work with a trainer, right? These are individuals who finally get to focus on their own personal health and goals and things like that. And so it's awesome. Like we are seeing, due to that giant population boom that I was talking about, we are definitely seeing an increase in like the capacity for our jobs. More and more opportunities are available every single day in this industry. You know, like it is kind of spooky. The whole AI conversation was like the big thing of 2023. And I think like it's totally going to continue in 2024 as well. But, you know, and myself, I have a Chat GPT account. You know, I was like, I used it to we used it to write some of the stuff in our like, you know, escape rooms and stuff. And it was just like, just let it AI do it really quick. And it was fun, and it was like fun to goof around with. But then like I was like, I wonder what would happen if I gave it like a bunch of parameters and told it to write a workout. And it was terrible. Not saying that it can't get to a good place in the future, but like that one-on-one like motivating factor that happens from working with a trainer, that's not going away anytime soon, guys. The ability to interpret and make an adjustment on the fly in the gym while you're working with a fitness professional, that is invaluable. So we are seeing that, like, you know, this industry is projected to only grow in the next coming years. But if we are going to have an industry where individuals are taking their health into their own hands, it is very important to make sure that that industry is well trained and suited for the task. So that is where the whole certified personal training certification comes from, right? So you guys are here to become certified personal trainers, right? That is a CPT, right? That is the definition of our sort of our certificate here, right? And so that can be obtained from a lot of different companies, but the one that you are here to probably get is NASM. I don't imagine that any of you are here to, you know, get the associates and then, you know, go pick up a NESTA certification the next weekend. That would be a very weird thing to do. You know, what is a certified personal trainer? Well, we are obviously responsible for a lot of different things, but we are responsible for designing programs that improve not only like general health and wellness, but balance, coordination, core strength, and overall movement quality. as well as improve and heal overall life quality, right? So like a lot of like what we do, it kind of takes away like those limiting factors that a lot of people deal with. Like so many people are going to struggle with like their mobility when they get older, right? And so we want to help people like stay upright. It sounds crazy, but just the ability to walk is a huge deal for seniors. It is one of the biggest things that we put emphasis on. It's one of sort of like the central theme of all of our programs are like, hey, again, I need to ask myself, is this helping my client, be better at staying on their feet and walking? So you can see we got our general, we got our millennials anywhere from 81 to 80 to 96, Gen X from 65 to 80, boomers from 46 to 64, and then silent generations out there, 25 to 45, right? And then we got our Gen Zers, anybody after 97. Do I have any Zoomers in here? I don't think I do, right? I maybe maybe Gabriel, but he's gone today. And it's interesting, like, and then Generation Alpha is on its way. So like it is kind of interesting. We're seeing these like large sort of groups here, and like there's sort of a defining characteristic for each of these. And we are seeing like a lot of boomers are getting to, that retiring age. And so those are the individuals that need that coordination, that balance, that core strength. So employment opportunities out there. You can see this is a really good example of like a very large commercial style health club. So commercial health clubs are definitely going to be the biggest employer of trainers out there. Guys, I actually don't have anything against commercial health clubs. I personally wouldn't work at one in like where I am at in my career right now. But like, I worked at LA Fitness when I was 18, and I am super grateful for that time there. Now, I hated it. And I was totally just like not in love with LA Fitness as a company. I didn't like how they treated my clients. I didn't like how they treated myself and my fellow coworkers. But they didn't necessarily treat me badly. I want to be really clear here. They did not do anything directly maliciously to me. However, they nothinged me. And that's a much better way to put it. I was a number in the system that made them money. And like, I have nothing against that necessarily, as long as they're not doing anything actively, against me. However, I am still super grateful for my time there. I think that like some of the skills that I had to learn while I was there are really valuable skills that still serve me to this day. For instance, one of the things about LA Fitness that you don't get at a lot of other gyms is they do 30-minute sessions. Seems a little crazy, and there's a lot to be done in 30 minutes. So I had to learn how to write programs that made my clients do their own warm-ups, that made them get into a really good place before our training session started. And I had to be really good at starting my sessions on time and ending them on time. And those are skills that like I wouldn't have picked up if I were able to just working with someone one-on-one. I mean, my sessions never start or end on time now. Because I show up at somebody's house and they're like, do you want a coffee? And it's like, you know what? I would love a coffee. Thank you. That's very nice. And then we chat and it's like, how are your goals going? And it's easy to kind of like let that time get bled away a little bit, and so like, I'm really grateful for like, when I worked at LA Fitness, if I had like a 6 a.m. appointment, a 6:30, and I didn't have like a 7, but a 7:30 and I had an 8 and I had a 9, I would either use that time to try and find a new client and get some new business for myself, or I would get on the horn and move every one of those clients up a half hour if I could. I'd be like, can you come in early? Great, get here by 7. Can you get in here early? Great, get here by 7:30. Hey, can you get in here? And move them all. And I would go home a half an hour earlier. And that like hustle is something that I wouldn't get at like if I were working for myself. I could have, but a lot of people are not naturally self-motivated. So I think that like that was a really valuable skill. Had nothing to do with LA Fitness necessarily, and had everything to do with the fact that like, I'm trying to be as efficient with my schedule and how I make money as possible. So if you want to be a commercial, work in a commercial health club, I fully support that. My advice to you is don't stay there for more than a year. Get out 365 days later. But it can be a really good place to get your feet wet. And that is my very genuine take on it. But I will also tell you, they will nothing you. That is very true. And you can return that nothingness. It is a true story as well. I oftentimes did not even bother to learn my direct managers' names. And I am not exaggerating, because I think like 2 to 3 years after I had like left LA Fitness, one of my clients from there called me and was like, "Hey, you'll never guess what I'm doing. I'm having lunch with Mike." And I was like, "Who?" And they're like, "Mike." And I was like, "I did not work with a Mike." And he was like, "Mike thought you did an excellent job." Mike remembers, and I was on speaker, which was very embarrassing. I mean, not that embarrassing. I'm never going to see this guy again, but still, like, but it was a moment of like, oh, I felt kind of bad, you know? And it's true. Mike was actually apparently one of my managers, and eventually I kind of remembered who he was. But like, you know, I would show up, do my job, and leave. They nothing me, I nothing them right back. And that is a valuable skill to learn, guys. I don't think that makes them evil, and I also don't think that necessarily makes it a bad place to work. But that is a very real review of that. Now, you can also be an independent professional. This is a lot of like what I do nowadays. You know, I've sort of been pivoting in the last year to like a slightly new variation in my sort of professional career. Now that like I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but like the whole fat freezing technology has gotten better, and it still hasn't made its way to the health and fitness industry yet. It is still very much in the aesthetics industry, which I think is a crime. And so like I'm trying to own that myself. So I'm offering, in addition to like my normal regular training, also like it's called cryo T-Shock, but it's like the cool sculpting stuff. And it's interesting, you know, like it's in home for the first. I don't know many people who also do that. But being an independent professional, you know, there are definitely some really high highs. I got no boss yelling at me, telling me what to do, but there's also some low lows. I don't have a boss who yells at me and tells me what to do. And that can be rough, you know, like if you know, it is tough to motivate yourself sometimes. The marketing is all on you. And I am a very excitable person. My buddy Ryan called it a blue sky thinker, which is like that person who's like, "What if we did this?" And then that's the end of it. It's like, or this. It's like a million ideas, but never follows through with them. Yeah, I got a little bit of that as a problem. You know, that is a flaw of mine that is one of my New Year's resolutions to get better at, you know? So there's some real benefits to being your own boss. There's also some drawbacks. You need to be self-motivated. You need to put a plan together for how you're going to succeed. I'm really good at setting goals, and I love action plans when I'm helping other people figure them out. I'm not so good at setting my own action plans. If that sounds like you, pick up a book, man, figure out, you know, come up with a strategy. That's what I'm doing. You got to sit together and get those action plans. There's small group training, which is really a great way for you guys to enhance yourselves. Actually, I'll just show you my website here. Oh no, I took it off. Wait, never mind, I can't do it. Small group training is actually a really great way to enhance how much money you can make. If you are charging $100 an hour, but your client, you have a client who says, you know, $100 an hour is a little steep for me. I don't think I can afford that. And you hear that from a couple different people. Offer small group training. Charge that person $75 an hour and train 2 of them at the same time. Duo sessions, you're making $150 an hour. They're both still getting a lot of personalized attention. I will say, do not take your small groups any larger than 4, in my opinion. At that point, it becomes group exercise, which is different. And have a slightly different take for both of those, right? But let's say you get 4 people, each of them paying, let's say $60 an hour. You're making $240 over one session. They're getting a really great deal. They're still getting a lot of personalized attention. And it can be a really great way to enhance your, we'll call it a product line. And then online fitness coaching has gotten so popular. I mean, Zoom has changed the game, you know. And so like Mo, who was here, some of you remember Mo, most of what he does is online training. You know, he does most of his stuff. As you can see here, we finally got my office back. I'm thinking about doing a little more online training than I used to, you know. I've got space to actually move around here now without, you know, Barbie underwater lagoons and and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that you can offer as like a product line. Now, if you are going to go the corporate route, there's also some really cool things that you can do in terms of career development. There are jobs as fitness managers, which are really great. If you find that you have a lot of like managing skills and you are great at being a team leader, that can be a really good spot. There's general managers, which go even a rank higher and sort of oversee the entire club. And then eventually you can even be your own facility owner. Jen, I know you have a large amount of experience with that. It's great. It can be really good. It all rides on you, which is extremely stressful. But at the same time, like, you know, I find that like my style of leadership is much more, you know, I am always worried about, am I doing enough for my employees? But that has also generally resulted in very inspired people who work very hard to ensure that like they get as much back from me as possible, which makes a really strong team. You know, so if that sounds like you, maybe the facility owner route is a great way to go. Now, adjacent to the fitness industry, there is also a lot of room in the realm of being like a master instructor. You get really good at this stuff, you can actually start doing your own workshops. Take a look here, guys. You can go on NASM, or you can Google NASM preferred provider. And you'll find Sochi up there actually, which is which is actually kind of funny. But if you take a look here, these are all like solid core. I don't know where this is, but solidcore.co, whoever these guys are. That's interesting. That actually is a really interesting way to motivate, because working out is all about like pushing yourself as hard as you can. But they have their own line of certifications. I don't know, what's this one called? Solid Core Training Installment. Hey, that is the worst name. Scrolling down, find a better one. Here's the Academy of personaltraining.com. And the course type is just a workshop. So you can go to any of these workshops, and they're oftentimes just gyms, and you know, every couple of months they offer a workshop on like a very specific thing. This looks like it is this looks to be just a general like be a trainer one, but here's an interesting one: stress, friend or foe. It's only 3 hours. It's a really short one. It's only worth 3.0 or 0.3 CEUs, but that is all about stress, you know. So there's a ton of these. Look at this. Still scrolling. There's a lot of them out there. A ton of them by Zumba. Yoga by Cassandra. That is literally just probably one lady. It's an online yoga thing. 1.3 CEU, so it's probably 13 hours long. You know, so you can eventually, like, let's say you've got a really great idea. Eric, let's say like you want to find a way to incorporate, you know, massage therapy and personal training, and talk about like how, like theoretically, how those two industries can come together, right? That could be really, really cool in how you sort of like meld it, right? Jen, I know your gym was a little bit more, you had like, you know, kind of two sections to it, didn't you? You said, talk about like how to marry those two concepts together and do a workshop there. That could be something that you guys find yourself doing in a few years, you know? I've definitely got my strong opinions on things. I've never really come together to write like an actual workshop, but being one of those NASM preferred providers gets people to earn their CEUs, and it can be a really good way to make a living. There's writers or bloggers. That's a really big one. Obviously, we live in the world of TikTok and Instagram. So, you know, influencers can be really big. So blogging, influencing, strength and conditioning coaches. If you guys decide to go back to school all the way to get your CSCS, that is definitely an adjacent career that is very specific to Olympic lifting and a very different style of training, but can be really great. You know, I pops into my head every now and then, and I immediately go, nope, no more student loans. But but it can definitely be a spot in this industry. Or you can end up like me, end up working at a college or a trade school as an instructor someday, which is super great and has taught me all kinds of new skills that I did not have when I started this job. So no matter where it is that you are headed, you do got to make sure that you are writing a very specific and effective resume. Now, the nice thing is we can move through this relatively quickly because you guys have the benefit of being Sochi students, which means you have got Miriam on your side, who is an absolute freaking rock star. Fun fact, guys, actually going to make this class announcement right now anyways. We are going to have a special in-person next week. Let me make sure that I have the date and time correct here. But Crunch is going to come visit us. So we're going to do a little bit of a special lesson next week. On the 9th. So yeah, that is Tuesday, right? Not Thursday. Yeah. So Tuesday, next week, are in person. Please be to class on time. That is going to be a big deal. Crunch is going to come visit us and talk about all the benefits of working for them. This Crunch, by the way, is not your typical Crunch. They are going to be from Crunch Corporate, which is a slightly different location than usual. This is either the West Hollywood or Burbank locations. Not that it isn't bad to work for regular Crunch, but they have a different pay rate. And they have a different style and bonus packages and things like that. But they're going to come and talk about all the benefits. My PFT students will be there. They're going to join us, which will be kind of fun. So I'll get to kind of blend you two groups together, which will be really interesting. Yeah, they're going to do a whole talk, and Miriam will be there. But talking about resume writing, Miriam is our career services advisor, and she is so freaking good at getting you guys resumes as you graduate. And we want to make sure we get a jump on that. But your resume should be creative. Make sure that it is creative, but honest, organized. Guys, you are all going to be like direct graduates. If you are writing a resume, if that is something you plan on doing, put your education first. A lot of people will try to hide the fact that they don't have like a lot of like professional experience, and so they'll try to like fill it up with like other professional experience. They'll get really sneaky. Don't do that. Just put the fact that you're new. Equinox, which is oftentimes thought of as like the best gym in LA, right? They're oftentimes like thought of as like the really schwancy, like, you know, really great gym out there. But here's the thing. They love recent graduates who are brand new to this industry, because Equinox has some really strong opinions on how they do things. And if you're new, you probably are not set in your own ways. Like me, it's too late for me. I'm old and crotchety. You know, I've got too many opinions. So Equinox wants nothing to do with me. But you guys are, you know, brand new to this industry. You're green. They want that. They love our graduates. We have a really great relationship with Equinox, actually. Make sure you're organizing it in a way that makes sense. In my opinion, put your education at the top. A lot of people will, I shove my education to the bottom. I don't use it as much because my work experience is more important at this point in my career. We're all in different spots. Try to throw some unconventional, unique stuff in there, you know? It's fun. I actually have, this is not even, I'm not making this up. I have Ultimate Frisbee listed on my resume. It is listed under like, you know, one of my training types, you know, a little bit of kettlebell stuff, suspension training, Ultimate Frisbee. It's niche. It always gets a reaction. You know, people are like, that's a weird thing to put. But it's fun. And then try to be vulnerable. You know, show your successes, put your fun stuff in there, but also show that you are committed to growth. This is another reason why I always tell people, put your education at the top. It's a really great way for you to say, look, I think me being new to this industry is an asset. I may not have as much experience as somebody who's been doing this for 10 years, but I know you've got a lot of experience. I'm excited to learn. Let's go. That type of thing. Whenever I see come across a resume like that, when I was working at Biggest Loser, I loved those type of resumes. I always called those people in. Now, when I was hiring at Sochi, it was a little bit different, you know, because this is obviously an instructor position. But I still always took the time to like call those people and just tell them, I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know, I love your resume. I think it looks really, really great. We're going to go in a slightly different direction, but keep doing exactly what you're doing with this resume. I think it's, and like, I always want to like prop people up for stuff like that. And I think other people agree with me. So here's an example of sort of what you're going to, things that you can include. I'm not going to go through all of this directly, but this is the kind of stuff this is directly where Miriam's getting a lot of her stuff from. And then, like I said, now this is a paragraph approach. This is going out of style. It still made it into our little textbook here, which is relatively new, but this whole process of like, this big long paragraph here is very much going out of style. And then, like I said, you can see they went with work experience, education, and then other interests. This is where you can put your ultimate frisbee, by the way. Luis, soccer. You can put that in your other interests section, because I know you do a lot of SAQ stuff. So like this, I would say, guys, put your education above this and then work experience second, unless you are putting more emphasis like on your massage therapy, physical therapy aid and things like that. If you want to put more emphasis in those areas because you've been working in them and that's the kind of job you're going for, that should go to the top, because I know a lot of you guys already have tons of experience there. You just need to consider where your assets are, guys. Oh, no way. Yeah, that's awesome, Eric. Oh, that's great. We'll break many legs. Awesome, dude. So yeah, that's the thing. Like when you're looking at your resume, here's how it works. People will usually read a resume. I think the average is 15 to 20 seconds, which is not that much time. And they read it top to bottom. So you put your biggest assets first. If you're new to this industry, education is your biggest asset. It sets you aside from a lot of people who did at-home training. If you've been in this industry for a while, great. Put your work experience as your biggest asset. It's a little bit different for everybody. So when it comes to job interviewing and job hunting, right? Where to look? There's obviously Indeed.com. Google's got some really good stuff. Glassdoor is really valuable for your hunting, but I find that their job application is not so great. So like they get really good information about companies when you're doing your research. I love Glassdoor for that. I usually will not apply through Glassdoor. I'll try to find the same job on Indeed, and I'll usually apply through there. I think their website's a little bit better. But their stuff's really, really good. When it comes to your attire, 2 advantages in your corner, guys. Number 1, it's the fitness industry. It's relatively casual as is. Number 2, we live in California, which is about as freaking casual as it gets. This is a true story. I remember like going on a first date with my wife, and like her profile, she was from New York. And so I was like, I'm going to dress up a little more than I usually do. And that was slightly the right move. I feel like to this day, people are like still getting used to the fact that like, West Coast casual is a very real thing. Now, that being said, you should 100% be professional. Do not show up for your interview in shorts. And I know that is surprising. So when I say it can be more casual, I mean, if you were in New York City, I would recommend you wear a freaking suit. Here, I would say business casual is going to get you by just fine. Nice pair of shoes, slacks, belt, not white socks, and a button-down shirt for my guys. Ladies, usually like a simple blouse. You can do like a second layer over top. Minimal perfume, minimal makeup, flats, closed-toed flats, and then you can go with like pants or like a long skirt to the ankles is what I have heard Miriam say a million times. I'm not as good at the ladies' advice. I apologize, but I've listened to Miriam talk about it enough times that I've picked up what I can. Oh, and then simple hair. You don't have to go. Doesn't have to be
Down to the floor.
What's that? What'd you say?
I said more like below the knee skirt, not quite a floor length.
Oh,
want
sure.
to
Yes,
there
thank you.
and
Below the
vomit.
knees. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I jumped just to the next landmark. Yeah, absolutely. Not a frog. So yeah, so that is what to wear. Guys, it's really easy. Business casual. And by the way, you can look up California business casual. You will often find a lot of like meme examples of this when you look that up, but there will also be some real ones out there as well. And you can see here, simple, doesn't have to be crazy. And weirdly, ladies can get away with jeans sometimes in interviews better than men can. Just because like they can be like more designery here in California. I'm still iffy on it. I do not like jeans in any form in an interview, personally. Then when it comes to your interview, make sure that you rehearse some of those questions. There's some really good examples out there on the internet. Like I said, guys, be as honest as possible. I like to be on the attack when I go in for an interview. I've been told that I'm a little bit of a weird interviewee. I've actually been told that a couple times. But I like to be very upfront and honest, and I try to take as much control of the interview as I can when I go in there. So for instance, when I auditioned for Biggest Loser, it was one of those things where I was like, I've seen the show. If you're looking for somebody who is like a really yelly trainer, that is not me. And they were like, but at the same time, and I was like, but I'm super committed to these things, and this is what's important to me. And if you'd like to see like an example of my style, and I brought in a few things. And they were really impressed with that. So be honest, be true to yourself. Because here's the thing, guys, if you lie to get the job at the interview and like say that you are one style of trainer, but you are not, you are just going to be miserable working there anyways. This, you got to remember, this is a job that you are going to maintain, not a job that you are just trying to win. Which I think for those of you who are like me, who are competitive, that's like a hard concept to memorize. So here's a good example of what your day might look like as like a general trainer, right? So you might wake up, get dressed, do your commute. A lot of times this training industry, your most busy hours are going to be anywhere from, now this says like 6 to 9 are generally training. Personally, I think 6 to 11 is actually a pretty good hour, especially now. I've noticed that gyms are more busy in the later mornings than they used to be when I was like directly working in gyms. COVID really kind of changed the landscape of the work industry, and so many people are working from home nowadays. So they'll take an early lunch. So you actually might find that you get pretty good results working anywhere between 6 and 11. Then you're probably going to have the dead zone right there in the middle of the day, which is usually what happens. So a lot of times, this is where I tell individuals, you can see here, this is like admin time and stuff. But usually I think group workouts at lunch, doing a group exercise class in the middle of the day can be a really good way to keep your paycheck rolling. And then generally I find that that is enough. Now NASM is going into like hardcore heavy work mode. And they can say that like between 4 and 6:30, you can get your evening clients. That is a shift that I never work. That time is pure chaos. And you could not pay me $200 an hour to do sessions in a regular gym at 6 p.m. You could pay me to work out at 6 p.m. honestly. It is way too busy for me, but it is definitely a very popular time. So if you've got a gym that is like has a specific trainer area where you can get separated out, well, that's a different conversation. I also think that's a really great spot for you to do one last group exercise class, which is my recommendation. This is very much kind of a gig economy in the training industry, guys. It's really good to have your one-on-one clients, but I do think like master a group exercise skill, you get paid way more per hour because they're making money on all those clients. However, it'll be really rare for you to get to do 2 sessions in a row. Usually they'll just have you come in for a class. But that hour is great. And you get a free membership there. You can take those classes. It's really kind of a good benefit just to enhance your life and stuff. I've considered, working a shift or 2 at Orange Theory a few times just because I think like I really like what they do. And it's a great place for you to pick up clients as well. And as far as marketing goes, it is a fantastic tool in your tool belt. So 1 or 2 of those a week or a day can be a really great way to just like enhance your paycheck. Eric, was it you? Somebody said last night, Starbucks money, that's what your group exercise classes can be. You know what I mean? You live on your paycheck, you set your money aside for your future with your paycheck. But go do that group exercise class and get a Disney, annual pass, whatever, like that's your date night money, So general operations, again, you want to apply this. We finally get another note here. Uncompromised customer service is what we call it. Hold on 1 second. Speaking of Miriam, she's actually calling me. Let me text her. And that's hysterical. A day in the life of a trainer, like I said, operations wise, you want to apply that uncompromised customer service, right? So this means providing accountability, support, feedback, and guidance for clients while maintaining a professional attitude and demeanor, right? So it is really, so it is really important to make sure that like you are 100% like giving your all to your clients, but it is really important to make sure also that you are not crossing the line into unprofessionalism. I literally got my job at Biggest Loser because of the example I gave you guys earlier. The trainer that got fired before I was working there took one of the clients to a Dodger game and posted a picture on social media of the 2 of them, and they were both drinking beer. Not saying that you can't have that in your life or anything, but it is certainly not what you should be doing with someone who you are trying to help lose weight. That is just not how we do things. So that was very much a real example, and the one I always use. Now, it is also really important to make sure that you always maintain your CPR and AED. So NASM is going to force you to do that. In fact, you guys can't even sit for your NASM exam until you take your CPR AED. You have to bring that card with you. And everyone is going to hear me say this right now one more time. You have to bring the card with you to sit for your NASM. I literally just dealt with this in December. One of my PFT students couldn't find it in her email, and they counted it as an instant fail because she has 2 emails, and she didn't bother to check both. Anyway, I am still angry about this. But they will literally not let you take your test, and it will count as one of your strikes. And you only get to fail 3 times before you have to wait 1 year to take your test again. So, yeah, so that was a big deal for her. Make sure you have your CPR, make sure you have your AED. That'll all be part of one thing. And then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the sales. We're going to take a look at the sales process here, right? When it comes to the general process of sales, sort of a 3-step process here. 3 steps to preparing. So here are our general 3 steps. Step 1, you need to identify your customers. Right. So what I mean by that is when you are putting together like a generally like marketing plan, you need to identify like potential customers. What type of trainer are you? Right. Me, I tend to focus more on corrective exercise, and then I sort of fell into the weight loss industry. You know, I didn't really plan on ending up as like a weight loss specialist, but it is totally where my career took me. Those are the potential customers I'm looking for. Do I work with bodybuilders? Maybe, you know, I have. Do I work with like athletes? Sometimes, you know, teens, maybe a little bit here and there, you know, but for the most part, like my potential customers are generally those individuals who are looking to lose a substantial amount of weight or those who have aches and pains. Those are the two areas where most of my skills have been sort of put. Then we need to make sure that we are communicating solutions to those needs. In my opinion, the example, like I saw like where people need things, they need to have convenience as well. That was like another need that I see in the industry, which is why I wanted to figure out how to do, you know, cryo weight loss in individuals' houses. So I came up with a system that would allow me to do that. That is the unique sort of niche that I carved for myself. And then lastly, we need to make for that sale by looking at the financial commitment to solve those needs. So make sure, guys, make sure that you are actually freaking asking for the sale. So many people are bad at this last part. They will do this amazing sales pitch. They'll set everything up and then they'll be like, all right, so yeah, I'll get in touch with you in the next 2 days or so. What are you doing? Ask for the sale. They are excited now. And then you are just sending them home disappointed that they didn't get what they wanted. It sounds crazy, but like so many trainers who are like learning sales don't ask for the sale. There's a really interesting book if you ever want to pick it up. It's called Selling Personal Training. It is not a super professional book. It's available on Amazon. It's clearly just some guy who wrote this book, but we were looking at it once, and we ended up not using it in our curriculum. Is it that one? Where did it go? Where did it go? Is it this one? Well, now it's not even on here anymore. But it was literally like this really simple, like, you know, made, you know, off the internet book that this guy made. And it was the guy who actually, like, you know, opened the training department at Gold's Gym. So like he, you know, Gold's was originally just a gym. He's the one that was like, we should offer personal training to other people. And so they kind of created the sales market in personal training, and it's really good stuff. It's really quite impressive. So when it comes to sales, if you are working in a traditional sense, you can do a lot of what we call prospecting. Prospecting is any means by which you are getting leads. And then leads are any potential customer, right? So a lead is basically like, it could be a referral. It could be somebody that you talk to briefly, somebody you give a business card to, somebody whose number you got. That is a lead. So leads are what you turn into potential sales. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's going to be really important for you to build rapport with your client, your potential client. And then honestly, one of the best things you can do is offer them a free, we're going to say session. You can do a free session, depending on what product you offer. In the personal training industry, generally will be a free assessment, because that is the most valuable thing that you can do. Because I love assessments. I love to take somebody and be like, here's what I see, here's a program that's going to fix it. And I'll just give it to them. And they'll go, this is amazing. This is really, really great. What a great product. And if they walk away and they don't sign up for me, I still feel good about something that I put into the world. I made some art. I gave it to somebody. I'm stoked. You know what I mean? But a lot of times my programs are like me. They have they have way too many words. They're a little more complex than they maybe should be. And they are very overly detailed. And so a lot of times people will come back to me and say, I would love for you to show me more about how to do this. And it does my selling for me. I have been told that I'm an excellent salesman, and I hate sales theory. I do it by being friendly, open, approachable, and I really like getting to do what I do. So those are things that do most of my selling for me. Now, it is also really important to make sure that you do your forecasting, guys. So forecasting is also part of your prospecting. And this is a method of goal setting to determine how many people need to be talked to make a living in this industry. So here's a quick example of what I mean. Let's say you want to make $50,000 your first year. Okay. And let's say you only want to work 20 hours a week. Okay. So your goal is 50,000 in the first year, only working 20 hours per week. There's your overall goal this first year, right? This is really easy to figure out, guys. All you are going to do is you are going to take 50,000 and divide it by the number of weeks that you're willing to work. Let's assume you want to take a 2-week vacation at some point. That means you need to make $1,000 a week. You want to work 20 hours a week. You need to charge $50 an hour for your sessions. That's not very expensive for personal training. Should be pretty easy for us to be able to make that much money in our training. You need 20 sessions per week, right? So now you figure out your closing percentage. So that means 20, so that's 20 sessions per week at $50 per session. So there you go. That's what we need to get to. So now you can actually do a little bit of like, figuring out what your closing percentage is. So a closing percentage is the number of individuals spoken to versus the number of individuals sold, right? So this is the number of people that you talk to versus the number of people you sold. Let's say you've got a 10% closing percentage. Right? So you talk to 100 people, 10 of them signed up for personal training. You need 20 sessions per week. So that is going to be a total number of 20 clients, right? Assuming that they're each training once per week, which, by the way, most people don't. They train more than that oftentimes. So 20 people per week divided by a closing percentage of 0.1, you need to talk to 200 people. So our new goal, or we need to talk to 200 people to reach our goal of 50,000 in our first. And that's how you can figure that out. Now, you guys can move those numbers around any way you want, but that is how you figure that out. Set yourself a goal of how much you want to make. Figure out how many weeks you want to work. That will help you determine your prices. You can move those up, you can move those down, and then figure out your closing percentage. 10%, by the way, is a pretty low closing percentage. I mean, that's actually pretty average for some people. I find that with a little bit of effort, you can get that closing percentage much higher. Now, you also need to figure out what your USP is, or your unique selling proposition. Mine is that I train from people's houses, and Lord knows after COVID, that became a lot more popular. So it could be that you specialize as a corrective exercise specialist, nutrition coaching, sports-specific training, massage therapy. There's a lot of those different things, but those are going to be what set you apart from other trainers. You guys are walking out of Sochi with corrective exercise and nutrition coaching, instantly setting you aside from the average personal trainer already. So we've got a lot of unique selling propositions there. If you're not actually super passionate about either of those things, then figure out like what it is you are super passionate about. You know, me, I am passionate about continuing to work from home. That doesn't help me market or sell anything. So I had to figure out how to turn that into another version. So I imagined that there were lots of other people who had similar opinions. So I started doing a lot of that. I'm super passionate about not having to show up in uniform every day. No, figure out what your unique thing is, right? Me, it's usually corrective exercise. And then I found my, like I said, weight loss. I literally fell into it, and I'm like stuck there for the rest of my career. And I'm super grateful because people are so motivated by it and they are so into it. And it's weirdly the most like excited people get. Like when people's aches and pains go away, they're more relieved, which is great. But like the dopamine you get from someone who's like, oh my God, I didn't know that it could be like this. Ah, it's the best. So we love this job. I love this job. You guys will get there once you get working with your clients. I'm telling you, it's the best feeling. It's a dopamine chase for the rest of your life. All right, so then you have to figure out your marketing. Last concept of the day, wrapping up with marketing here. This is a much longer conversation than we can cover in, we could do a week on marketing. In fact, I do with my other class. But you need to create value and you need to create an identity for your brand. Marketing is not the same as advertising. Just to really get that out here and be really clear about that. Advertising is a way of communicating your marketing, but marketing is like setting your prices. That's part of your marketing. If you're setting that $50 example that I just gave you an example of, you're going to probably do pretty well with like a lot of individuals. However, it is going to attract individuals who are looking for a cheaper form of training. If that's what you're going for, great. If that's not what you're going for, then you probably need to make an adjustment. Your prices are part of your marketing. It's part of your identity. So figure out your strengths, figure out your weaknesses, figure out your opportunities, like where can you attack a market compared to somebody else, and figure out what your threats are. One of the threats to me in like my at-home training thing is like individuals oftentimes get a little bit more flexible about canceling, which is a bummer. And I do not have the sharp edges to often charge people when they cancel on me. I'm not very good at that naturally. So I've had to like harden a little bit and be better at that. By the way, you should always do it. Take my advice. Just don't do as I say, don't as I do. Charge, please. I have like a 3-strike policy that is way too lenient. But it is just, I don't know, part of who I am. I'm stuck that way. I gotta get better at it. So you got to figure out like what your threats are. Do you have competition in the area? Do you have a limited space to train? One thing that I'm struggling with right now is that like I kind of want to start moving my training and bringing clients to me. I can't do that in the Barbie room. I say the bar, it's my office. But I can't really do that here. I can't put a squat rack. I'm on the second floor. I'm in an apartment complex. So my wife and I are looking, how do we find a place where I can get a garage? We need a workshop. So last thing you got to look at, there is more to this. Like I said, we can talk about this forever, but the 4 P's of marketing. This is a test question as well, guys. So the 4 P's of marketing, right? You've got product, which is the specific product you are offering. It's not just personal training, right? It could be personal training and massage. It could be in-home personal training. It could be group exercise. It could be all these different products. Have a wide and varied product line. Duo sessions, small group training, half-hour sessions, corrective exercise, nutrition coaching. All 5 products that fit into your overall business. The more you offer, the more people you can hit. But you also want to make sure you're specialized so that you have a niche that you stand out. You want to be a little, it's the jack of all trades, but master of none situation, but that is better than master of one. So maybe a jack of a few trades is where we're aiming. That sounded really elegant in my head. Then we got price. This is the how much you are charging for your services. but it is also, it includes group discounts, buying in bulk, etc. I said that it was $50 an hour earlier when I set that up. I would set your actual prices much higher than that. Like, do not, because you can offer a discount for buying more sessions. Again, I'll just show you my prices real quick. Services, I need to remember there we go. So a single session, I have that listed as $385 in 1 hour. I never actually charge anybody that, because I don't want to do one session. By the way, that's for the cryo thing. That is not how much I charge for personal training. It would, it'd be amazing if it was. But you can see here, if my clients buy a 4-pack, it's $100 an hour. 8-pack down to 90, 12-pack. This is the one this is the most popular. And it gets down cheap, I love security. It is who I am as a person. I do not like guessing how much I'm going to make next month. I would much rather have people buy a lot up front, and I will give you a massive discount in response to that because it makes me feel more secure. So if you like that, great, So while I may say $50 in the example here, maybe that's the lowest you charge. And if your client buys more than that, well, guess what? You're going to make more than 50 grand a year. Or you're going to work more than 20 hours, one of the two. So that's your price. There's a lot to consider there. We got place. Now this is where your product. Where your product or service is consumed, right? I say consumed, but you know what I mean. In somebody's house, a specific area of town, and over the internet, over Zoom, right? And then lastly, promotion. And promotion is how you are going to promote your product or service. So this is how you are going to get the word out about your product. Me, I've got my website. I need to do social media, but I hate it. Again, I'm old and crotchety. I was an early adopter of Instagram. I am not joking when I say I literally have 13 posts ever. I got it the first week it came out too. So yeah, need to be better about social media. My wife is amazing with it, and she's, inspiring me to do better, but I got to be better about social media if I really want to grow my brand, So that is your promotion, right? Focus on your strengths for how you are going to network about your promotion. So social media, industry events, going to things. I found a thing just a couple weeks ago that I got to look back up, but a lot of other crowd T-Shock people are all getting together for a workshop on like how to do it. And, it's a little bit about marketing your services, a little about, interesting things that the machine can do. And I want to go to that workshop and, learn a little bit, maybe meet some people and, glean what I can. Or email campaigns, create a blog, an email, a newsletter with your clients, that kind of thing not only enhances your services and makes them seem more valuable, it also keeps your clients, keeps you in your client's brain, which is really helpful. We talked earlier about New Year's resolutions, right? It seems like a New Year's resolution is something that you start and then give up on. A lot of times that's because it is easy to passively forget something. But if you are constantly in your client's brain, they are less likely to forget you and much more likely to stick to training. So that is one of our strategies as well. And then, like I said, guys, you do need to make sure that you continue your education. So last little bit. Man, I said we're gonna. It is important to ensure that you maintain certification by earning 2.0 CEUs every 2 years. So this could be a workshop, it could be any type of event, so trade shows, workshops, online specializations, which that's the ones that you guys are already getting, college courses. can be a big one. Industry contributions, by the way, what's interesting is if you write a workshop and you teach that workshop, you get CEUs for it, which is kind of fun because you had to work and think and develop and you enhance the whole industry. And we are grateful. So you get CEUs out of it, which is kind of cool. So 2.0 every year. So 1.9 CEUs from trade shows, workshops, online courses, etc. And then 0.1 of it must be CPR every 2 years. And them's the rules, guys. That is everything I got for you today. I apologize for over talking. I always do this at the beginning of the year. I get a little distracted every January and get even chattier than I normally am. Oh, what have I done? But let's wrap up the recording here.